hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is located in the board meeting room on the north wall. The purpose of this meeting is to receive an update regarding the Omaha Public Schools Common Grading Practices Committee and persistently low achieving schools. Roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Faye.
Here.
Godding.
Here.
America.
Present.
Scanlon. Snow. Underwood.
Here.
Vargas.
Here.
Wayne.
Present.
Williams.
Present.
7 present.
Okay. At this time, I would entertain a motion to excuse Mr. Scanlon and Mr. Snow. Mr. Scanlon had a previous commitment this evening. I haven't heard from Mr. Snow, so I assume he might be on his way. No. Okay. So do we have a motion?
I could be wrong.
Does anybody want to make a motion to excuse Mr. Scanlon and Mr. Snow?
So move.
Motion by Mr. Wayne. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Vargas. Roll call, please.
Faye.
Aye.
Godding.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Underwood.
Aye.
Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
7-9.
Motion carries. Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda that is before us.
Be angry.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Williams. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Merica. Are there any abstentions? Mrs. Underwood.
I'll be abstaining from, sorry, it's having trouble pulling up here. Whatever, D5.
I know it's D5.
Yep.
Is that it?
D19.
Okay, it moved. So I'll be abstaining from D5 and D19.
And D19. Okay. Abstention by Mrs. Underwood on D5 and D19. If there are no other abstentions, then roll call, please.
Godding.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Underwood.
Aye.
Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne. Williams.
Aye.
Faye.
Aye.
6-I.
Okay. Motion carries, and we did have 5 ayes on D5 and D19. So we had the majority. With that, we're now going to move on to our first item for the workshop, which is standard-based grading. And so I just want to start off by looking at policy 2100 and 2110, which talks about the role of the superintendent of schools. So policy 2110 specifically states that the superintendent serves as the educational leader of the Omaha Public Schools, and also that the superintendent shall be responsible for the conduct of the instructional program, shall provide courses of study, textbooks, supplies, and supervision for the instructional program. So this is really a meeting to, a workshop to allow those who have served on the committee to bring forth their thoughts, and it really will be for the superintendent to decide how the standards-based grading is set. But it'll give the Board of Education an opportunity to ask some questions based on the fact that many of us, whether as parents or as board members, have heard comments. So at this time, I would ask that the members who are presenting from the Standards-Based Grading Committee come to the front.
While they're coming, could I make a couple of introductory, Madam President? First off, I'd just like to say thanks to the entire committee, our teachers, the administrators that worked on that committee, our third-party facilitator, Mr. Smith, who are going to lead the conversation tonight. They've spent an enormous amount of time looking at data, looking at research, and figuring out how to come forth with some next steps with our grading and our grading system. And it's been kind of a journey that included a survey of all of our teachers that kind of led this group to begin with. And the survey kind of indicated some of the things that the board has heard and that I've heard for the last 2 to 3 years, and that is we need to do something different. But we don't know exactly what that something different is, but we need to do something different. And so we really tasked this group to look at that something different and to come back to myself and for the board to help explain what they've been involved in and what they've spent their time on. So I want to thank again all of our teachers and all of our administrators who have worked on this with our third-party facilitator.
Great. Okay. So President Gotting, Vice President Williams, Mr. Evans, board members, thank you for your time. Thanks for letting us talk to you today about the Common Grading Practices Committee. We appreciate that. We've certainly, as Mr. Evans indicated, put in several hours of time and conversation, and it's been very fruitful, we think. So just to give you some context on where the committee came from and where we are now, more than 6 years ago in this district, every teacher regarding practices did their own thing in terms of grading. The only thing that kept them together was the scale itself. All sorts of grading practices, including using a curve, writing your own rubrics, providing extra credit for bringing Kleenex, all sorts of things were on the table. They were not common practices necessarily. What was common was that we had a 100-point scale. And that was the only guiding standard, and the only way that there was consistency amongst classrooms was for a teacher to have an instructional leader in that building provide some of those guiding practices. There wasn't a district guiding practice. And the only way for parents and students to really understand what those practices were would be for that individual student and that individual parent to sit down with that individual teacher and talk to them about how they led things in their classroom, maybe at a parent-teacher conference or in a phone call. And so it was decided around that time that the district's job was to consider what some common practices would be and to make an adjustment to the scale. So in 2010, we adjusted from a 100-point scale to a 6-point scale. And at that time, they worked from 2009 to 2010 to determine the rollout. They did some professional development, some presenting, some discussing, and it was my understanding that that previous curriculum and instruction administration worked with committee members for the change. I, at the time, was in the building. I was an assistant principal at Nathan Hale at the time, and I was not part of that committee, but I can say that, and I think our committee would agree, that we all feel that maybe that rollout wasn't exactly the way to roll it out at the time. And so we come to you knowing those things, knowing that that initial rollout 6 years ago was something that we want to do better this time and we want to do well. And our committee has been very conscious of that. So the new scale was rubric-based. It was 6 points, as I said, and there was a desire then to do some grading practices that required standardized standards-based grading, which involved trending, and that we learned Infinite Campus really couldn't do for us, which is our grading system. And so in an effort to fix and adjust some calculation errors, and based on feedback from the grading committee, I'm told that the grading scale changed to address some grade inflation in 2011 and 2012. And then based on more feedback from buildings and teachers, it changed again the following year in 2012, 2013. In another effort to correct grading, and really we were hearing from building leaders and from teachers that there needed to be an adjustment, and the committee made that adjustment. And then finally, in January of 2013, it was brought to our attention that teachers were putting in an inordinate amount of time entering grades the way that they had been set up. and some were clocking, 70 hours just trying to get through their grades in the way that the setup in the grade book was. And so in an effort to put their focus in the classroom and not completely in their grade book, the way that we set up the grade book changed in January of 2013. So over the course of those years, there were several quick changes, and I think a lot of members of our community and teachers will remember that. I'm sure you all, having students in the district, know and remember those things. So jump ahead 2 years, and there was a survey that was distributed to families in January of 2015, and we wanted to get some feedback about grading in the district. We were interested in finding out from the teachers how they felt. And it was determined that it would be best for a committee of 20 to review the practices and review the proficiency scales and review the grading scale and take a look at all sorts of things. We went from a 100-plus committee to a 20-person committee to allow us to work in a more streamlined fashion. And at the start, Erica Volker from Partnerships for Education facilitated our first 3 meetings. And after the 3rd meeting, Erica Volker got a different position in a different company, and we were looking for another facilitator. And that would have been the fall of this school year. In the fall of this school year, we looked from August through early December for a facilitator, and it wasn't until we asked about 8 people if they would be interested in facilitating, and it wasn't until we asked Dr. Peter Smith, who's a retired Omaha Public Schools math supervisor and director of research, and also retired UNO professor. He agreed to facilitate our group. So we picked back up in January of 2016. So there was a window in the fall where we were not meeting because we were looking for an external facilitator to lead our group. And so Dr. Smith has done so, and our work these last 6 months have focused on the mission and reviewing grading practices, cross-referencing that with research, and evaluating and reviewing some of the grading scale work that we do. So that's the context for it, and I'm going to let all of those pieces, I'm going to let the teachers here and Dr. Smith talk a little bit about that. So I'll introduce them as we go. Our first teacher to talk here is Tracy Weatherly.
Hello, I'm Tracy Weatherly, 3rd grade teacher at Joslyn Elementary, speaking as an elementary teacher on the committee, not as an OEA board member. I've been teaching with the district for about 30 years, and I think there is great concern with the grading as we discussed. The mission of the OPS Common Grading Practices Committee is to establish, communicate, and support the implementation of common research-based assessing and grading practices that promote and accurately report the student learning. As a committee, we had several deliberate conversations regarding the best practices for this communication. This is to help all stakeholders to have a better understanding of proper procedures and practices in regard to grading. With the research, we developed a statement with carefully chosen verbs to articulate an improved, accurate way to report the student learning. Thank you.
Sorry. Push this button. Sorry. Our next committee member is Cameron Pentland.
Ladies and gentlemen of the school board, thank you for your time this evening as we discuss the progress of the OPS District Grading Committee this past year. OPS instructional best practices are regularly reviewed and reflected upon to ensure that we have implemented the most effective and the most accurate means of assessing students, and this requires a careful analysis of what is in place, what works, what doesn't, and how we ought to improve. It is important that the board and those in attendance understand that great care has gone into ensuring that any potential decisions with regard to grading practice are consistent with current educational research. Committee members have spent time reviewing and discussing educational research literature prior to and during this process. The purpose of a literature review is to both guide our discussion and to ensure that any recommendations are educationally sound, practical for teachers, and good for students and parent stakeholders. OPS has already made important shifts in our grading practices consistent with research to which Mr. Clark Kazmarek has referred. In our discussion throughout our meetings, all committee members consulted numerous peer-reviewed studies and texts on grading and grading practices as part of such a literature review. Collectively, we have reviewed and analyzed recent texts such as Thomas Guskey's On Your Mark and Rick Wormelli's Fair But Not Equal about grading practice and philosophy. This has given us the opportunity to cross-reference our current grading practices brochures, both at the elementary and secondary level, available to our parents and stakeholders, with current educational research to assess and help determine which areas we might seek improvement. All committee members reviewed the current research-based practices. We compared them to that of OPS in place and discussed how teachers may more effectively and accurately apply grades and assess students. One of our principal efforts has been to balance district-wide protocols with teacher professional autonomy and decision-making concerning their grade books. We believe that teachers are the professionals in the classroom and, consistent with the language in our grading brochure, ought to make professional decisions about the values of their assignments. While we have yet to put these recommendations formally to the superintendent for consideration, we have discussed allowing teachers more freedom to weight assignment categories and specific assignments in their grade books, addressing the need to more clearly define an overdue work practice that balances student learning with student deadline responsibility, and review the current grading scale to adequately and accurately reflect student knowledge and proficiency. Thank you.
And I just want to say Cam works at Alice Buffett Magnet Middle School. Yeah. All right, so our next two presenters, they'll kind of work together, are Dr. Peter Smith and Mr. Justin Potts.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is always like coming home to me. As CK mentioned, I spent 30 years with the Omaha Public Schools. I retired in 2000, and the last 15 years I was at UNO in the College of Education and Educational Leadership. And it was great to get back here and work with teachers. And the one thing that I noticed mostly is that it's so important to combine research and practice, using the best practice research combined with the expertise of great master teachers and leaders that you have in the Omaha Public Schools make for good decisions. The teachers and the leaders on this committee were able to take what we read, as Cam mentioned, through the research and apply it in real situations to determine the best for their student success. We looked at a number of grading scales, and as CK mentioned, there's a host of them, from a 2-point scale, pass-fail, to a 100-point scale, and everything in between. So we spent considerable time looking at that. In the research, according to Thomas Guskey, two of the goals for the scale selected should be successful communication of information to all the stakeholders, and also to help provide incentives for students to learn. And I think that's where the teacher's input was so important in terms of this process. As I said, we looked at a number of grading scales, and I'm going to ask Justin Potts to talk to you about some of the scales that we looked at and how we kind of settled on what we did.
All right, thank you for the time this evening. I'm going to talk to you about the grading scale. One of the first things that we discussed was the grading scale because we knew it was an issue of concern to teachers. If you look at the survey that was done in 2014, 2015, 2/3 of teachers either agreed or strongly agreed that the grading scale needed to be changed. And if you break that down, 80% of high school teachers believed the grading scale needed to be changed. And it kind of drops off as you go down. It was about 72% of middle school teachers and only 46% of elementary teachers. But when you look at those numbers, they scream there's something not right here. And so that was one of the first things we felt we needed to tackle. It's one of those things that's right in everybody's face because it's printed on report cards, it's put in the student planners, it's something that everybody sees and that everybody's concerned about. So we prioritized that in some of our early discussions, and as Peter mentioned, we had a group come up with some different ideas to change what we had. At one of our meetings, we had 4 grading scales proposed that we considered. Ironically, 2 of them actually turned out to be basically the same scale. proposed by different people. And so we looked at those 3 scales and we talked about what the best things to do were. So I'm going to see if I can I open this document on here? Just so, maybe. Just want to walk you through a little bit of our thinking so you understand where we're coming from. You have the accept. So you should have this obviously in paper copy or electronically, but just so we have it in front of us. So here is the grading scale, the current OPS grading scale that we were looking at. And the first thing I'll point out is, for the sake of comparison, the actual current scale has an A- and an A category. So A- runs from basically 3 to 3.5, and A runs from 3.5 to 4. Same thing with this one. 2 to 2.5 is a B-, and 2.5 to 3 is a B. Now, part of the reason I bring that up is because one of the things you look at in research is they encourage having equal intervals. And if you just look at this right now, you'll notice that the A category is a width of 1, the B category is a width of 2, and then you got a width of 1/2 for the C, and 0.75 basically for the D and the F. So there's not a consistency there. One of the concerns that a lot of teachers had was, when you look at this number down here, where they originally chose to set the cutoff for the DF at 0.76, teachers, teachers can only give grades of basically at the elementary level of 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, corresponding to failing, beginning, below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced. At the high school, they're allowed to enter 3.5 and 2.5 for some demarcation in those upper intervals. The reason I point that out is, if you look at that 1 on a proficiency scale, a 1 is below basic. And for a lot of teachers, a student that can consistently get below basic would just be at a 1, but here you have a student who's getting basically 3 below basics and a failing grade consistently, and they're still getting credit for a class. And that's not just basic, not proficient, but it's below basic. And if you look at the proficiency scale, that's a concern to us, because students at that level are not prepared to go on to the next class. They're not ready for the next grade level. And so we felt that that was something that needed to be addressed. So the proposal that we ended up landing on was this one here. And one of the benefits of this scale is, as you can see, it takes the A, the B, the C, and the D, and it equalizes those intervals so they're each 0.75. It also puts the passing mark, so to speak, for a D at a 1.01, which basically means students have to get at least below basic, get some basics on assignments to earn a mark of a D in a class. The reason we did this is because we really believed that the way the scale was right now, the expectation was not high enough. There was discussion of raising some of those marks even higher, but in the end, the committee decided to land on this one, recognizing that some students will struggle, and we need to allow room for recognizing those students that have demonstrated some learning, but that just are lagging behind their peers. So having talked about this pretty in depth, the committee at our last meeting, we decided we wanted to move forward with this. However, in light of what CK said about the way this was initially rolled out, and if you caught that, the grading scale was changed about 5 times in 5 years. We had high school students that literally graduated from high school having had 4 different grading scales in 4 years of high school. That is a concern to us. So our decision, the majority decision of the committee, was to look at piloting this grading scale for the sometime during the 2016-17 school year, so that we could see, does it achieve some of the things that we're hoping it does? Is bringing that up to a 1.01 going to compel students to work just a little bit harder? And if there are issues, we want to be able to address them within the pilot before we roll it out to the district as a whole. What we don't want to do is push it forward, get a year into it, and realize that there's something else that needs to be tweaked. and then have to do it again. I think that's all I have.
So just to kind of wrap up a little bit, I first of all want to thank these 3 teachers for taking a day in their summer to come in and share this with us. It was a lot, and actually taking time with me and with the committee, those teachers coming in these last few days and working with us, it's been really great. You know, the work of the committee, as Justin indicated, is not complete. We continue to do more planning for what we consider to be a pilot year, a field testing year. We want to roll this out in a way that is much more effective than perhaps the last time it was rolled out and without as much change. And we want to make sure that it impacts the way that we want it to impact and that we've got the right answer for our adequate and accurate reflection of student knowledge and proficiency. So we're kind of taking really a holistic view of these grading practices, not just the grading scale, but we're also considering the brochure language that Cam talked about. As a matter of fact, we're going to meet very soon, and we're going to talk about brochure language that we'll make adjustments to, and we're going to talk about how we would like to field test this grading scale and what our plans will be. So our work does indeed continue, and as a matter of fact, through the end of 2017, we'll continue to not just pilot, but hopefully if it is what we want it to be, we'll be communicating with principals, communicating with those assistant principals of data who are working directly with the grade books and who are helping teachers set them up and answering questions about grade calculations with them, providing whatever communication we need to all of those parents and those students and all of those teachers so that it's very clear by the time we hit August 2017, a year from this August, if we're going to make that change, that's when we would like to actually go live with this grading scale change. And after that time, we believe we will continue to meet, but probably on a much less regular basis. We've met monthly as much as we could, and we want to ensure that our practices are best for our teachers and our students, and so we will indeed want to maybe meet twice a year just to ensure that we can review practices, because that's the charge that we were initially given, was to look at this holistically, and we don't want to lose sight of that once we've made an adjustment. So unless there's anything else, we're open to questions.
You know what I think we'll do? We had so many members of the committee who are here as well. So how about before we go to board member questions, if there are any members of the committee who would like to share something additional that maybe would be helpful, that would be great. If anybody would like to come, we've got a mic up here on the corner if anyone wants to share. Mr. Wagner, and I think Bridget was part of the committee as well. So if there's anyone that was on the committee that would like to share, that would be great. And you guys can stay here, please. There's a mic at the end, too. But and then we'll let Mr. Evans share a few comments, and then we'll go to board member questions. So you may answer some questions that we might think of. So Mr. Wagner, we'll go with you first. Who's at Central? And Mr. Potts, you're at South, correct? Okay.
Okay. This has been like Dr. Smith had said, quite a journey, and what kind of drove us forward in this was looking at the current grading scale as well as the current grade distributions. I can't speak for other schools, but I can speak for Central as I provide those distributions to my principal every grading period, and I see an overwhelming number of A's, and 64% of first semester grades were A's and B's, which is wonderful on paper, but is it accurate? Are they really achieving that high? And that is kind of what drove us. And what Justin had said at the beginning was the students with a 1 or below basic, everybody on the committee was not okay with students performing at below basic and earning a credit. And there's a lot of that. And so that's kind of why the urgency a little bit on our in our case. One of the things that, can you put that grading scale back up, Justin? One of the things that we saw, if you look at the grading scale on the right, you've got what teachers can give for grades. They can give a 0, a 1, a 2, a 2.5, a 3, a 3.5, and a 4. If a teacher gives a 3, that is the highest possible B. So there wouldn't need to be too many 3.5s given to raise that B to an A. It's the highest possible B. And that's where Justin was coming with. If you look at the C, the highest possible C when teachers give 2s, that's a C, but it's the highest possible C. So if you look at the grade distributions, you'll see not a lot of C's because there's only one, and it's at the very highest of the band, and that's what Justin was talking about, and we tweaked it to put equal intervals with those grades. But that was our those facts there. That was why I wouldn't say rush, but why the urgency with this.
Ms. Donovan?
Thank you. One thing that we are concerned about, that I am concerned about, is the lack of urgency that there seems to be on some of the members of the board and some of the administrators at the district level. We've known for years there's an issue with the grading. We've known since the rollout. The first year of the rollout, I sat on that committee. Even though I'm an elementary teacher, Mr. Prue asked me to sit. The very first day they introduced this to secondary teachers, the secondary teachers said, hey, we have a problem. So from the very beginning, we knew there was a problem. We have students now passing classes that they have failed to show that they have a proficient understanding of the subject. This is happening now, and it has been happening. And the teachers have asked with urgency that this be taken care of. And this issue has been brought forward repeatedly. Teachers feel a great sense of urgency, tremendous sense of urgency over this. And the majority of the board does not seem to share this urgency. The grading scale as it is now, in addition to what we talked about with the lower end, it's not fair to the higher end of the scale either, because we have students who are doing marvelous, fantastic things academically, but because in the community there is not trust in this grading scale, they are subject to unfair scrutiny. There is not faith in this grading scale, so we are students who in some cases are making unprecedented academic achievements. They are still being questioned as to whether or not it is worth what it truly is worth. And it is. It is, but they are being unfairly scrutinized and questioned about whether or not their achievements, they deserve the honors they are receiving. And third of all, it's teachers who are at the front line. When there is a question about grades, it's teachers who take the hit first. People may come to the board second, they may come to the superintendent after that, but when there's a problem, it's teachers who are taking the hit. And teachers are not feeling supported. We do not feel supported when it comes to the grading scale. And the lack of urgency is foremost. We need action on this. We've been asking for action continuously. And a year-long pilot, waiting another year before we address this issue, just is not going to work for teachers. We can take the scale, we can run the numbers of our students from last year, and we can see what impact that would have on grades, and we can see how it would have affected. We can take actual students from this year, run them through the system, see what it would have done to grades, what kinds of outcomes would have happened to those students, we can look at numbers that way. Mathematically, it can be done. But this is an urgent issue that we really should not be spending another year investigating.
Thank you for your comments. And I'm not sure that the board doesn't think it's important. So I'll move forward with going to Mr. Evans on, Mr. Snow, hello. I'll go forward to Mr. Evans, let him make a few comments, as he was at the last committee meeting, and he's the one that will be working with the committee to make the final decision, and board members will certainly be able to give him input tonight and also before he makes a decision, right?
Well, thank you, Madam President, and I really think the teachers who are on the committee do have a sense of urgency, and I've not heard from the board or anyone else that they don't. I think it's just been a challenge trying to figure out some of the mathematic calculations, and the other issue that I've heard the board deal with and the committee deal with is how Infinite Campus works and how you take the grades that the teacher inputs and then it has to be recalculated. And so I've heard some our teachers like Mr. Potts at South High and Mr. Wagner at Central High, I've heard them describe some things. It's pretty complex, more complex than maybe it ought to be, but it's part of the system and how Infinite Campus works and part of what our teachers have to work through. So I guess what I heard the committee members say, which I don't think it was about them not having a sense of urgency on the committee that wanted to make sure the calculations were right. What I heard them say was, shoot, I don't want to do what we did for 5 years, where we changed every 5 years. And I have to be honest, that was one of the things I heard more than anything else is fix it, but fix it right. Quit fixing it and coming back the next year and fixing it again. 5 years in a row. I had kids telling me, don't do anything to it until you're ready to do it and be done with it. And that was a strong statement from many of our student groups that I meet with. So they're anxious to get something. I think everybody's as anxious as Ms. Donovan is. I think everyone's equally anxious to get this moving on. I think it's a situation none of us are enjoying talking about anymore. And so I'm thankful for the committee, and I don't want to just throw their work out. I struggle with that to say, well, even though you recommend a proposal to me as superintendent, that I should say, no, let's not do that. So I struggle with that some. And I know we're meeting again, I believe it's June 9th. And so we'll have an opportunity to have discussion based on what we've heard from board members tonight, what we've heard from other folks that might have some other comments tonight too. So, and I know the committee will take it seriously. I think the teachers that are here tonight and the teachers that are in the audience. And by the way, could we have all the members of the committee, could we have them stand so everyone can recognize the folks that have been really working hard, all of our teachers and administrators that are on this committee. Could you please stand? Let's give them a round of applause. So again, they'll be meeting June 9th, and so we'll be following up on the comments that come from today's meeting. So again, thank you so much for all your efforts.
Well, I want to thank you also for coming and presenting this evening and sharing with us. I'm a parent who had a senior that graduated with 5 changes, and I think at every graduation the speech was about, and it changed twice our junior year. So it was a difficult environment to be in, and I think there was a change to A- and B- and there hadn't been before. And so for those kids, their grades looked a lot different on their transcripts for college than what they had the previous year. So I understand as a parent how difficult that was, and look forward to seeing some changes. So at this time, I would just open up the floor for questions from board members to either the committee, if you wanted to better understand a very complex, but you did a great job of explaining it, and Mr. Wagner added to that explanation on just defining those bands. So maybe if you could pull that back up again, and also if board members have questions for Mr. Evans. So any questions at this time? Mrs. Fay.
So I just want to make sure I've been reading it right. I mean, basically, it's not complex at all. We're just going back to a grading scale that with this point system, and teachers can decide However, when we were throwing out all of the proficient and all that stuff that we did before, and teachers can, and I'm not saying this is bad, I'm just trying to, in like layman's terms, understand this. So a homework assignment's worth this much, and a test is worth that much, and they can do extra credit, which would be worth X amount. Okay, I'm saying yeses from some and no from others. Okay.
So we're still going to be using the proficiency language, or at least the numbers that go along with that, because we want to ensure that a 3 means a certain level of learning. So we're not looking to move away from that necessarily. We are looking to allow some more flexibility in the way that certain grades are entered into the grade book. For example, one problem we have right now is where the 2 graded categories we have are formative, which is kind of your more daily stuff, and then summative, which is your tests and projects
Right.
and stuff like that. And one of the concerns that's been expressed is within that summative folder you have, or formative, you have this problem of, so say you're going to put a quiz and a homework assignment in the formative folder. Right now they have to be weighted exactly the same. But most teachers feel like a quiz that you do in class should carry more weight in your grade than an
Right.
assignment you do.
So I
And
understand the problems with the formative
Okay.
and summative and all of that. I'm just asking if we're getting rid of all of that with this. Okay.
No, we would be keeping all that. The only thing that would really change is where that A cutoff would be, where the B cutoff would be for particular grade. So in terms of what's going to be on the report card, what's going to be on the transcript when the semester is over.
So can you just share with us again what teachers can put into the grade book? Because as a parent, I know, but if you've not been a parent, or that would be helpful, because you're not going to see someone put in a 1.75
Correct.
or a 2.25.
So a teacher, and this is my understanding, this is a little bit different from elementary than it is at high school. So I'll speak as a high school teacher. As a high school teacher, I can only put in 7 marks. I can put in a 0, which would basically be a student that doesn't know pretty much anything. A 1, which would be below basic, which would mean, so you have basic, which is a 2. A 1 would be they're somewhere between that basic level of understanding and knowing next to nothing. A 3 would be what we consider proficient. That would be basically they're meeting the state standards that are for that particular content area, that particular domain. And then a 4 is advanced and typically implies that the student can take whatever the course content is and, say, synergize it, can take things that weren't necessarily directly covered in class and bring other things together and kind of go to the next level, so to speak. So like if you think about traditionally, those are your A students that could do not only what you asked of them, but they would go beyond that. Now at high school level, we allow teachers to endpoint a 3.5, which would be a student that's somewhere between that proficient level. They can do all the proficient stuff, but they can't consistently go to that next level. And then a 2.5 is allowed, which is somebody that's between that basic level of understanding, pretty consistent at a basic level understanding, but hasn't consistently reached the proficient level on a particular assignment. There is no 1.5 because basically the 1 is the middle between basic and failing. So that's kind of your middle mark for that grouping. Is that good?
You did a great job. Thank you. Yes,
So-
because as a parent, it's sometimes a little hard to figure out too. And I think if we grew up in the ABCD system or a 100-point scale, as parents, it's a rethinking of what does it mean. But I think after this many years, most of us have probably figured it out to a certain extent. So I guess one of the things that I would toss out to Mr. Evans and the committee as you think about piloting, I'm just thinking about where we're at on the academic eligibility. So I think big picture, everything, how does it impact all of our kids? And on academic eligibility, I think we're in year 3, right, Mr. Wayne? So I guess what I would toss out there is just to really be thoughtful that if you aren't piloting it for all high schools, for instance, that you could have kids say, oh, wow, I can go over to that high school to run track, and it's going to be a better deal for me, So I want to be thoughtful in that. The other thing that I'd ask that you also be very thoughtful in is the new AQUES system, which the state accountability system is, and that tracks graduation rates by high school. And so I had been visiting with Mr. Wagner, so I know that there were a lot of kids who got a D or a C who may have gotten an F had it been redone. I also believe that kids will rise to the occasion. And so for the child who knows if I skip class and I don't turn in those assignments, but yet I nailed the test at the end, I can still pass the class, they're going to do that. So I guess I would just ask that we're very thoughtful on the AQUES piece, because if you have schools that implement it and the standard for them is a little bit more difficult than the standard for other schools. So I'm just thinking about it from a big picture standpoint, and, would just like to see something that doesn't create disparity. So if you're piloting, maybe it's a pilot of all high schools, and which 80% of the teachers you said wanted to see something different, and then maybe that's where you tweak it before you get to middle school. I don't know. I'm just tossing those two pieces out as components of our entire district and not wanting there to be disparity. Mr. Pentland.
Yeah, just to speak to the development of the piloting process, we've yet to really determine what that's going to look like, but certainly we don't want to create a disparity within the district among schools where some schools will be piloting this or not. We're looking at options of perhaps piloting it in a way that maybe be retroactive, or maybe we would be looking at two scales concurrently, but certainly we would not intend for some students in OPS to be assessed differently, or at least have a different grade threshold, because that would be unfair to those students.
So I appreciate that, and just wanted to toss that out as y'all are processing through that, and as Mr. Evans contemplates what he's going to implement based on your recommendations. Dr. Smith, sorry.
And just to add to that, one of the things we want to do is, as we said, one of the purposes of this grading scale is to motivate students to learn, and by piloting it, we want the students to understand what's happening with these changes, and not have it happen to them, but have them understand what's going on, so that it can be, once again, the motivator that, as well as the communicator that we hope it can.
Mrs. Underwood.
So we had one board meeting, I think, perhaps, with this board where we talked about this. And so I pulled up notes from that meeting. And one thing jumped out at me, and I just want to kind of get the committee's thoughts on it. It's kind of a summary of this survey. One of the bullets was based on teachers' responses to questions 14 and 15, 38% of students and 22% of parents had a thorough understanding of grading practices, and that's according to teachers' input. Survey results, that's what this says. Survey results indicate teachers feel strongly that parents and students do not understand grading practices. And so the action step on here was additional training and support developed by the committee to provide more resources, materials, and support to staff, students, and parents. I'm just curious what the committee talked about on that level.
So we continue to talk about, excuse me, we continue to talk about resources for parents and students. We have what's called a student-friendly flyer that shows our grading practices that aren't in teacher language, and it's actually printed in our middle-level planner for all middle school students to see. It's also something that we distribute to all of our students and ask to be given out at conferences and open houses and things like that. It's something that we have yet, as a committee of 20, to really dig into. As Tracy indicated, one of our mission statements is to communicate these practices and to to make that a part of our work. And that's a key component that we would be working on in this upcoming year, is to try to help the understanding of these practices. One of the current misunderstandings, I think, that exists out there between parents and teachers and students is that homework does not count. And I think we've tried really hard to dispel that myth, but it continues to bubble up to the top, where we, the committee, and Omaha Public Schools do not believe that statement. Homework does indeed count. It counts a lot. As a matter of fact, homework can easily be a formative and or a summative assignment and should indeed count for a grade. It is maybe being misunderstood. It's, semantics. It's really what the understanding of what a practice assignment would be. It's something that a student doesn't necessarily have to demonstrate, but they can practice to get better at. Those are the kinds of things that may not count for points, but the things that do count are indeed those things that you can demonstrate your understanding on, and those things happen at home many, many times. So those are the kinds of things we continue to work on. We developed a couple of series of videos that we showed to all the teachers and all the students to try to dispel some of those myths. It's an evolving and constant process for us, and the committee will have to dig in on that as well this year.
Thanks for that. It probably also didn't help that it was changing from year to year.
Right.
So hopefully we can, over time, overcome that too.
If I could just speak to something else, in the past couple of years, OPS parents are now they now have the parent portal, which is available to them. The students are now able to have an app on their phone to look at grades, and I think that added layer of transparency really helps in some ways, and it hurts in another, because now you're looking really ostensibly into the works of a grade book, and sometimes that creates more questions, and sometimes it forces teachers to respond to parent concerns, and they're valid concerns, but it may just be for clarity, because now the grade book is really front-facing as opposed to something that is seen as a result of parent-teacher conferences. Now that it's available, that's definitely changed the kinds of conversations that parents and stakeholders have with their teachers.
Mr. Snow and then Ms. Williams.
Thank you. So you're going to do 1 year of piloting. If you're changing the grading scale, what are you piloting? What are you looking for in that? Why? Could you explain a little bit more in depth why not a full implementation across every grade level? And then on top of that, answer that first, and then I have another question about that.
So I'll speak from my own personal thoughts on it. So one conversation we had as a committee, even with the grading scale that we're proposing, was even that bottom D, should it be at 1.01? Should it be at 1.26? Someone even suggested 1.5. And there's one thing that has to be considered when you're trying to set a grading scale, is that in one sense these numbers are arbitrary. Like some conversation with my wife last night on the percentage scale. Why is a 90% or a 92% or a 94% the bottom of an A? And why is one school do it one way and one another? Because it's just what value you're putting on that particular learning. And so one of the things I don't want to see happen is I don't want to see us do that and have teachers saying it didn't go far enough, or it went too far, or some of those kind of things. The other thing is, to what Bridget said earlier, is you could plug numbers in and see how it shifts. Like, for example, a kid that right now had a .80, right now they'd have a D. If you change grading scales, they'd have an F. Okay, we can look at grades and see how that happens. In fact, as a committee, we did that with grades from Central from first semester. My concern is, and one of the things that I would like to know for sure is, obviously, if you just shift the numbers, the percentage of Fs is going to increase. Okay. However, I don't believe that's really going to happen. In fact, we looked at data from Central before we changed the grading scale, and the percentage of Fs in one semester was basically the exact same as it was this semester. under a 90 or 100-point scale and the current scale. So what I want to know is, will students really rise to those expectations? How will student motivation, how will student conduct, how will parents interacting with their kids be impacted by the change? And you cannot assess that without acting on it.
So this is based off of, do they know the material or perception? I don't want us to get into the point that we are saying the bottom tier, we have to change it because we don't want to discourage children or students from reaching or achieving the expectations that we set. So I believe that if that's the case, and we believe it should be a 1.5 or whatever, I think that's something that we as a district should commit to, and not have that fluctuate based off of perception or we think kids are having a tough time. Of course, when we change this scale, a lot of kids are going to have a tough time across the district, but we are now setting a new standard on where they should actually be moving forward. I remember the comment that Luann said about, if we pilot it, do it across all high schools or something similar to that. I just feel that if I'm still the same way, if I'm in 8th grade and I'm going into high school and high school has set the bar even higher, I'm going into a false reality that I think I'm at that level and I'm actually not there. Does that make sense? If you can go back and you can look at previous years and you can actually put this scale to all the grades, you pretty much know where you will sit. So I understand you're speaking from your experience, but I don't know. I would really love for the committee to kind of think about that, because if we do wait a year, then you're talking about pushing it off, and then it doesn't affect every student. My next question is about the parent portal and how parents with the communication. I think that's a pretty big issue for me with that, is because I had a lot of students this year that did not understand the grading scale as it is. So they did not know until, maybe it was just a senior, but they did not know until 4 weeks that if they were going to walk across the stage or not. They didn't know what assignments, and the teacher was basically explaining to a 17 or 18-year-old of what assignments they have to turn in order to be able to walk across that stage. So you have kids that are going through the full system, and I think we have to think really outside the box on how do we really educate not just the student, but the parent to fully understand that moving forward. And that's one of my other reasons why I don't think we should do a year of piloting. I think it should be a full implementation, and then us spend that next year really, the committee focusing on how do we really explain this to parents and students so they fully understand the system. So you don't have, well, we're piloting here, but it's going to change next year. We're going to do some more tweaks, or we're figuring out the perception, what people think. And, so then you have people confused for a year, and then God knows what happens 2017, right? So
if I may, I don't know that I can address all of that, but I would like to just note that we have not discussed the exact logistics or plans for how we will pilot. There were a couple of ideas that were thrown out that seem to have become sort of the way we're going to pilot, but I would hate for us to land on what's discussed here without including the rest of the committee in that discussion. It's really important for us to talk about all of the things that we're bringing up, and to bring up things like equity and the middle level as opposed to the high school level that you brought up. I think that is huge. I think what's the key here is that we need to talk about, because we did vote to do this testing, and that is something that we do plan to do, that how we do it has to be very careful, and what we do. And we even talked about doing it in a way that doesn't take an entire year, but that we wouldn't actually make the change for a year. So, for example, we would pilot for a quarter so that we could look at that data, and that we could then review that data and spend the next 3 quarters of the year talking to those principals and getting them ready for the conversations they're going to have with those parents and with those family members and their teachers, especially talking with those teachers, preparing the data processors, as I indicated. I think it's about carefully rolling it out rather than flipping a switch.
With that, and I'll end. You just explained my entire thing. That's even more confusing to me. if we don't even know how we're going to pilot it. That's more scary, that we don't know if it's going to be this level or that level. So I think if we were going to put on the list to a board workshop and say that we were going to pilot something, we would come in front and say, this is how we are planning to pilot it. Because I don't think we have another workshop talking about it, but I think we can go into that a little bit later, but that's just my opinion. Thank you.
You might have missed the first part. Yep. So we talked about the committee will continue to work away, and then they will bring their recommendations to Mr. Evans, and he'll implement that. And we'll have plenty of opportunity to share. You can share with him personally or through tonight how you would like to see that done, but it's really his, as I read in the policies, it's his to make that decision.
If he's going to pilot or do a full
How
district
he's going to
implementation.
do it based on the committee feedback. And Tracy would like to share
Fair enough.
something.
If I would just be able to say that I think it's important that, as a committee, we discussed at great length this grading scale as a key part of everything else that's going to happen. And those other steps are what we still want to iron out. And that's exactly why we don't want to just throw a grading scale out there and say, this is what we're going to do next fall. If we don't have those other pieces and we haven't communicated that to everybody else, that was a huge discussion that we had, because it's not only the grading scale, it's your proficiency scales, it's your communication to all the educators that are a part of this, all the parents, all the students. And we were having a great deal of concern that we would just throw a grading scale out there and not have the rest of the pieces of the puzzle to make it a good system.
Mr. Vargas.
Well, I'll jump in then. So just a couple of things. You guys have really answered most of my questions, so thank you. One, I really want the committee to think about whenever that is, this rolls out. You should really be starting the conversation with communications and working with Mrs. Farmer to really talk about this, because this is something that parents are going to want to understand. And Tracy, you brought up a great point about if we do it too soon, we won't have that communication. However, we've heard from Bridget today, and so there seems to be some disconnect, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot. However, we have teachers here representing, saying we need this. There is urgency, but we all have to be mindful, and this really is coming from you and from Mr. Evans. So can any of you kind of touch base on that? Because it does concern me. One, that we're kind of at odds, and we've had other things that we've moved through quick, and there's just been a lot of backlash on both sides. And so, out of this committee of 20, it doesn't appear that we're all on the same page with this. And how are we going to address that? How are we going to do our due diligence to make sure that students are first in this equation, and it's not about us professionally, or it is about you, because you are out there and you're talking with parents, and I'm that parent like, okay, how did you get this grade, and let's talk about it, because I have an upcoming senior. She's technically a senior now, but we've been through this many a times, and it's very frustrating as a parent. So it's a very convoluted conversation. But the committee recommendation is to pilot and wait to fully implement this in the 2017-18 year. But we also have some of the committee and teachers that are saying, no, we need to do this now. So just wanted to hear some thoughts about this, because this is not our decision to make. This is Mr. Evans' decision to make. But I think it's important for all of us to kind of hear both sides of this conversation.
So, just in the air transparency, we made the decision to move forward with the grading scale last Thursday. Is that right? And we basically took a straw poll at the end of it on the issue of piloting. And it was one of the issues that we were probably the most divided on. Like a lot of things, it was pretty much unanimous consent. On this, it was about a 2/3, 1/3 split within the committee, with the majority wanting to pilot it and the minority wanting to just go in. And I understand both sides of the issue, because the reality is, and this is where I feel like we were put between a rock and a hard place, because that time we lost in the fall, due to a lack of a facilitator. If we could have had the conversations that we had in February, March, and April, in October, November, December, we could have run a pilot in the spring and fully implemented it in the fall. In an ideal world, that would have been the perfect solution to everybody's concerns, and there wouldn't be any. And the risk, I guess my biggest concern is I don't want to walk away with egg on our face again. I don't want to jump in and do something because we feel the pressure of urgency and then have it blow up in our face like it feels like so many other, as a teacher, it feels like so many other things have, with the grading scale constantly changing, with extending the school day last year. And these things that, and to be honest, part of it for me is we're talking about June right now, which means this is another summer implementation, another, hey guys, you're coming back and things are changing. And I know that frustrates a lot of teachers. Is this something they'd overlook that on? Possibly. I mean, I just don't know. But I think our meeting on Thursday is an opportunity where we can discuss the issue of, and I think even revisit the pilot issue in light of Mr. Snow's comments and some of the things that have happened as to, what really the best course is at this point.
Great,
And
go ahead.
Since we had other committee members speak, I would like to hear from Bridget as the representative of the other side. I think it's just an important portion of the conversation.
One of the pieces that I do think the board is missing, I think Justin is right, we did miss a considerable amount of time as we waited for a new facilitator, but our committee was also interrupted. Before the May meeting, we had come to agreement. We had a consensus on what we wanted to do. At the May meeting, a new grading scale was proposed. We, the committee members, and I talked to almost every teacher on the committee as a representative of teachers. Every teacher was shocked that a new grading scale was put in front of them that had not previously been discussed. Now, Mr. Evans, and thank you, Mr. Evans, took action to bring us back to where we were so that teachers could then discuss, and we did end up with where we were. However, we lost valuable time because that happened. Had we not been presented with a new scale, we would be in a place right now where most likely we could tell you whether or not we wanted to pilot, how we wanted the pilot to be, what we wanted the pilot to look like, and so on. Now we are in a position where we could feasibly end up waiting a year to implement something that we could have taken care of before we ever came to you. That's part of the frustration we're dealing with right now. And teachers don't want to wait a full year. The other thing is that we need to make it clear at the beginning of a committee such as this, which I do have to tell you, I have immense respect for this committee. There are so many qualified people from all places of education, all levels, elementary, high school, administrators everywhere. This is a committee that has taken their charge very seriously, and highly, highly qualified people. But the committee members do need to know, and you need to know when the committee such as this is put together, does the committee have autonomy or not? And if they do, then we need a process where we say, this is what the committee suggests, that the people who are in, let's say it's reading or math, do not agree with them. They recommend this because of these reasons, because they have a different set of knowledge than the committee might. But you need to know what it is the committee's recommending as opposed to what the powers that be are recommending, so that you are getting a clear, unfettered recommendation from the committee. Now, I can tell you, because I talked to the teachers, with maybe two exceptions, the teachers on the committee were highly concerned about whether or not they actually were free to speak about their opinion of the grading scale after the new one had been introduced at the May meeting. And I know, Mr. Evans, that you did everything you could to make people feel comfortable in stating their opinions, and that meeting occurred when I was out of town, so I'm content with what I heard that teachers did. There was a high level of anxiety from teachers about whether or not they could speak for what they wanted to speak to. Second of all, there was not much time given to talk about the pilot and how it would look. And I am concerned about that as well, and it's frustrating to have this conversation right now when this is not the conversation we should be having at this point.
Thank you. I would encourage just some, not some contentious, but just some feedback, because I think this is important, not just for us, but I think for our public as well.
And I'd like to clarify the May meeting very, very briefly, just so that we all have a fair representation of what happened. There was not a new grading scale proposed at the May meeting. It was the same scale that you see right here, the 3.26 to 4, 2.51 to 3.25. The facilitator had been thinking about this because he's been thinking on these topics with us, and one of his concerns was that when you look at those 3.5s, you look at the 2.5, the grades that teachers can put in the grade book, that there wasn't an alignment with the proficiency scale. In fact, I didn't mention it, but one of the things that we talked about is, for example, if you give a student a 2, if you got all 2s, you would get, under the new proposal, you would get a C. If you got all 1s, you would get an F, technically. Although most teachers, if you got a 1, would probably round you up to 1.01, so you still got a D, I don't know. But there's no way to give a D on an assignment if you look at it that way. And so that's a concern, because before the problem was all the marks landed at the top of the interval. So as Mr. Wagner mentioned, if you got 1 or 2 marks just above that, it would push you up into the next interval. So Peter had wanted to present a way of trying to deal with that by using midpoints, which is really complicated. But we went back, we talked about it. CK put together a little activity that we went through, but basically we decided, after the conversation on Thursday, we decided that midpoints were, as a committee, the midpoint was not the way that we wanted to go. It was too complicated. It was going to create issues with Infinite Campus because numbers weren't going to mean what numbers had traditionally meant, and so we kind of rejected that proposal and decided to stick with what we had. But at the May meeting, it created an awful amount of confusion that we had to work through.
Well, I just want to thank you both for presenting both of that, because fortunately, this is a decision that the committee and Mr. Evans gets to make. I don't envy you that decision either.
We have a good committee. It'll work.
However, I just want us to all remember that, we're all doing this for our kids, and we all know that it gets very easy to get caught up in kind of the adult conversation of this. And so I just encourage you at your next committee meeting to really just look at what's going to be best for kids, what's going to be also best with families, and help you to facilitate what grades look like with families, because that's kind of the bigger conversation of where are our kids achieving? How are they really doing? Not what does it look like on paper? Yeah, it looks great on paper, but how are they really doing? Are we sending them off to college ready to get that post-secondary education? Those are conversations that you all get the enjoyment and pleasure of having. But I appreciate hearing both sides, because it gives some light, not to just us, but to everyone, because this is a big issue and it's a huge conversation. And again, as a parent, I'm a little nervous. What does this next year look like, for my child and those children that I know and work with? So it's a tough conversation to have, but kudos to all of you for saying what you need to say. And I also want to tell you all, as teachers and employees of this district, I might ruffle some feathers with this comment, but you should be able to speak your truth, and you should be able to come and say what you need to say without fear of retaliation or anything else, because you are the experts in your field, and you are there, ground zero, with those students, with each other every day. And so I'm just going to say out here for everyone that we should be listening to everyone. It's not one person's opinion over the next or someone's experience over the next. We need to kind of shift the culture at OPS and talk about, I have a different experience than Miss Merica, and her words and comments and experiences are just as valuable as mine. They may not align together, but we should be talking about what's best for kids from our own personal perspectives and not being fearful or scared of retaliation or anything else that should happen. This should be truly a conversation what's best for kids, and we are all colleagues and partners in this. So I just wanted to leave you with that, and hopefully, what the committee and Mr. Evans works through will be something phenomenal, and we can get past this conversation and talk about some other great things that we have going on in our district.
Can I
Thank
speak
you.
to that?
Okay, go ahead.
As a new OEA president, I look forward to having that conversation with you.
Mr. Vargas, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I actually think a lot of it now has come out. So the only thing I'll say is, and this is more of a recommendation, thank you guys for doing this work. It's not easy because clearly there's a lot of different sides to this. And I remember when we had this last conversation, the big question that did come up that Ms. Underwood brought back up, and Mr. Snow and several others now, around the rollout, teacher support, clarifying rigor and norming, that all those are going to be, in my opinion, probably more important than the scale itself, because we can have the exact same problem that we're having now. I understand the urgency. I'm trying to temper myself. I'm like, yeah, let's get it. Let's roll it out. But rolling it out might just have the exact same problems that Mr. Potts, that you mentioned. And so when you are thinking about the recommendations in your work with Superintendent Evans, that there is clarity on what changes in practice and habit we'll be doing different at every level. I think we've talked a lot about what we're going to do different within communication with parents, which is great. I'd also like to make sure that you are making recommendations on what we do different with teacher-to-teacher support, district-to-teacher support, on what both initial rollout and ongoing norming look like in this process, and then continued ways that we may collaborate with our diversity inclusiveness, our diversity and equity department, so that we're making sure that our communication is culturally inclusive for our parents and families, that making sure we're accessing those that have been less engaged in this process in the past. That's going to be very critical, and I implore you to implement that in your recommendation. And the last thing I wrote down here is, I think the devil's in the details. This goes along with Mr. Snow is saying, whatever you do decide, I'm leaning towards it rolling out to a lot of different places, to as many schools as possible, because it seems like it's going to be a lot harder if you piecemeal it out. And that we focus more on the culture change that comes with this, because this is one step, but this isn't a culture change by itself. These are just the numbers changes. This is just the distribution. We could still have the same problem if we don't change culture change. And that also starts with the committee here. Obviously, there's something that we need to work on internally in the ways that we provide autonomy and support and create a space for our committees to have this free and open dialogue, because if that's not happening and culture change can't happen on the committee, what makes us think it's going to happen when we roll it out to the entire district and all the teachers across all of our schools? And so that's also feedback for how we are managing or supporting you, and how the district is doing that as well, because it's clearly not where it needs to be yet. It's a process that we need to work through, because these changes can be hard, obviously. So thank you for continuing to do this and engaging in the culture change that is not easy.
Thank you. Ms. Merica.
All right. First off, thank you, everyone who served on the committee. I know this has been a long process and a lot of thought and research has gone into it, and we really do appreciate it. But I am also very glad that we do not have to make the decision on this one, and you guys will be working with Mr. Evans to do that. I see the arguments for and against piloting. And I think Mr. Vargas said a lot of what I was actually thinking about, as far as, what, if we pilot or don't pilot, what are we going to do differently so that this isn't the rollout of the last time there was a major grading change. And so my request would be that you guys keep us up to date on that, on what the plans are and how are we going to do effective PD. Because I know with all the curriculum updates we've done, a reoccurring theme we've heard is, how do we have enough time to do effective PD for all of our teachers on this change? How are we going to effectively do this so that people are coming into the year prepared? So if you can keep us up to date on what our plans are for doing that, how are we going to reach out to all of our families and communities to explain the changes that are going to occur, just so that when we are confronted with people asking those questions, we have that information to give them as well.
Mr. Wayne.
It was about a year ago that we started this conversation. And I have to say this, it's just amazing that we can restructure our whole school day and extend the day in less than a month, but we can't figure out how to do a grading system in a year. And so I'm very disappointed in that regard. So I got a couple questions. Is how many kids would have failed underneath this new proposed system in high school? We'll just go high school.
We did cohort data at Central High. We did not do a district review of data. And that's why we feel like it's premature to be able to, we don't even have those numbers to provide for you.
So how many kids would have not graduated?
At Central?
Yeah.
I don't know. Tom, can you speak to that?
No, I can't. I just looked at side-by-side data, students who had a D between.
We'll have you come to a mic, maybe. Okay.
We didn't look at it as far as who would have graduated versus who wouldn't have graduated. We looked at who had achieved at a proficiency rate between 0.76 and 1, because our initial charge was students performing at below basic, and there were hundreds.
So we're going to discuss a pilot or changes, and we don't know how it affects our kids today. That's concerning. And what is the poverty numbers of Central versus the other high schools?
We're at about 55% free reduced lunch.
Or what about the other high schools?
I honestly don't.
My point is that we're proposing a change in grading scale after a year, and we don't know how it impacts our kids. There's a problem with this. And I've been the first one last year and been talking about it, that we have to change something with our grading system. But right now, after this meeting, if somebody comes up and says, how will it affect my kid? I can't answer that question, and we've talked about this publicly. I don't have an answer on how it impacts the most vulnerable kids based off of the data that we have. And I know it's speculative to say that kids will change and rise to the occasion, and I'm a firm believer in that. But this isn't a data-based decision that I know of, where I haven't heard any data is what's concerning. Mr. Allen, we've had conversations, and I seen you stepped up, and you were on the committee.
Yes. I know we don't have data saying how many students would have failed, and I think that's impossible to do, because what we as teachers all know is that students reach the bar, and right now the bar is set very, very low. If they continue to act the way they act and do the work they're doing, they will fail their classes. However, as has been pointed out here at this table a number of times, we are raising the bar within the idea that students will work a little harder, and we don't want to send students off to college unprepared. And while we can't speak to how many will not make it or anything like that, I think that's impossible to say. How we're talking about a moving target of an old scale compared to a new scale. I have to say that this will prompt more students to work harder and be more prepared for college.
I don't disagree with you. I just remember when I had the big conversations about GPA requirements, we had all this data about all the number of athletes who wouldn't be able to participate, band students who wouldn't be able to do this and do that, and then when we talk about this, there's none of that same data. And so I hope moving forward we're consistent with data-based decisions. My question, and I don't want to put you, Mr. Allen, on the spot or anybody else on the spot, but does this change the core concern that I hear from parents and that the last meeting the young lady from the Student Voices spoke about, which is students picking and choosing when to do homework, when not to do homework, sit around through the most of the semester and not do any work, and then take one test and get a 1.0? Does it change the core issue with our grading that I've heard and that this board heard from the last Student Voices that presented last week? I guess that's my question to the committee. Does this change that?
Mr. Pentland looks like he has an
I
answer.
believe that's kind of what I was saying before. We're asking them to step up a little higher. Hopefully that will mean they're doing a little more work. We also, as we've talked about, the language in the brochure for students and parents in regards to late work, homework, things like that, that will change as well. And I think those things will make a difference.
And to speak more directly to your question, Mr. Wayne, the grading scale is one portion of the recommendations that we will be making to Superintendent Evans. This adjusts the threshold to, we feel, more adequately reflect students' work at below basic and failing. We do have proposals in place that directly address the issue of students ignoring large portions of their work until later in the semester. We want to make sure that the recommendations that we make about homework, for example, late work policies, late work protocols and practices, those that the teachers have the ability to respond to those ahead of time, so a student can't just do next to nothing for most of a semester or most of a quarter or a course and just come on, meet above the bar. We also feel that those kinds of ideas work concurrently, that if the bar is higher, it's harder for a student to try to coast by, and if we have a higher threshold for success and we have practices which address students not doing homework regularly, that together we're going to have more prepared and successful students, not just in college, but in each successive grade.
We keep, I just want the public to be aware that policy can always be changed. So while Mr. Evans is making this decision, this board needs to be cognizant of this affects all of our students. And this is like the railroad on the tracks. Like if the tracks aren't where they need to be, it doesn't matter where the train is going. The tracks have to be where they're supposed to be going. So it's a huge issue to me. But my concern now is we had a year and we don't really see a whole lot of the proposals that you're listing. I didn't read them anywhere. I think they're still in conversation. But how are we going to pilot something when it took a year to get to this point and you have 2 months before school starts?
Well, with all due respect, we did address the fact that we did not have an entire year because we were seeking a third-party facilitator earlier in the year.
And with all due respect, you guys are adults and you guys, I think, can meet, and you guys are experts in this area. And I don't think we need to have a facilitator to have conversations. I think we have experts in this area within our own that can have these conversations. So I'm not taking away from anything because we didn't fly in a facilitator to extend the day when we had these conversations. So there's been many decisions we made without a facilitator. I'm just concerned from a timing standpoint. How are we going to do it when we spent this much time getting to this point and we don't have? And it's along the lines of Snow's questions because this is a huge issue. And I don't want you to answer this right now. I hope staff will keep board informed, public informed, because this is going to be a big topic. We have a crowd here on a summer day, which doesn't happen very often. So I just think we have to be cognitive. And so I'm being kind of hard because when I go door to door I still hear this as a big issue. So I want to be able to point to something and be able to communicate. And right now, I don't really know what my answers are all going to be, except for we're working on it. And they're going to say, well, we brought it up last year. And so it's not a good enough answer right now to the public. And I understand the situation. We had to get a new facilitator. I get that. But at the end of the day, we graduated our class. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to graduate another class. And now we're going to have 2 more classes since this was raised before every student every parent will have an idea of what's going on. So that is very concerning to me, especially when I'm sitting there shaking kids' hands as they walk across stage, and then they come and do an application for the company that I have, and they can't do it right. That does concern me, and when I get feedback. So this is very important, and I appreciate all the hard work, because I run into a lot of people that are on the committee and talk about it, but there is this sense of urgency. I don't know how to, as Mr. Vargas said, how to push it forward without making sure we got all our ducks in a row. I'm just very concerned that we might not have a plan to roll it out effectively. And it's no offense to Mr. Evans or anybody else, but it's just been a history of how we got here that maybe not everybody else has the same concerns, because I actually seen it for a long time, and it's just concerning. So, that's my comments.
Well, I want to just wrap up by saying thank you to the committee. I know many of you who have served on there, very high-quality individuals who care deeply about our kids, and you, as well as the board and the administration, want to make sure that the grade that's given to a child accurately reflects that student's ability and the effort that they put into the class that they took. And so we want you to continue to work together to figure out what the best way to do that is, so that a grade is simply there to help a child understand and to help the parent understand where they're at, and to give that teacher information about the student to say, you know what, you have work to do in this area, or we need to help you with this. So I know you all know that, and sometimes I think we lose sight of what a grade really is. And so as a parent, I just want you to effectively communicate to me, and I want my child to put forth the effort and the achievement that they need to succeed in every single class that they take to their ability. So I want to thank you all for the work that you've done, and we'll look forward to hearing from Mr. Evans probably through email updates, and then probably some comments at board meetings just to give us feedback on what all you come to a consensus on is the way to move forward. But I want to thank you for being here this evening, for all of the effort that you've put in to making this effective, because I can look at it as a parent and say, I can see where it makes some changes, and I think that's effective, but I've been with the system and watched it change many times. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness. And you have many comments to take away, and Mr. Smith, you have lots of facilitating to do. So thank you so much. With that, we're going to move on to the next one, which is the persistently low achieving schools. So we'll take just a couple minutes here while folks swap out.
No, that's after. It'll be Reach, Kennedy. Oh, excuse me. Have them sit here, and then we'll come up there. We'll sit down. I thought over there would be better.
Okay, it's up there.
Okay, I think we've got everybody realigned here that we need to, so I'm not sure who's kicking us off. Do we
Ms.
know?
Coleman.
Dr. Chisholm, are you kicking us off?
No, I'm not, Ms. Coleman. I'm actually passing it up
Okay,
right
okay,
now. That's
okay.
what I'm doing.
Sorry, Doug, we have to wait for Doug.
Then we'll have you come sit up here. You'll be the first.
All right, with that, we're going to go to Mrs. Comine, right? Are you the one kicking us off?
Yes. All
Perfect.
right.
Okay. Thank you so much, and we'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Good evening, President Godding, Superintendent Evans, members of the board. On behalf of the REACH Committee, it is an honor and privilege to present to you the work that we have completed and the supports that we are providing to our persistently low achieving schools, also referred to as our PLAUSE schools. Please note that throughout this presentation and also moving forward in our work with the district and also our schools, that as a district we have decided not to call our persistently low achieving schools PLAUSE. We have decided to call them REACH schools, and I will share with you what that REACH acronym means in the second slide. We do have a variety of presenters here tonight because we do see this as a collective effort on the school's part, but also the district's part to provide support to our schools. In addition to the REACH committee, we also have Principal Tony Gunter, Principal Howard Kennedy, Principal Ebony Harvey, Principal at Wakanda Elementary, and they also have select staff here that will be presenting specifics relative to their school. So why REACH? If you take a look at the acronym REACH, it stands for Resources Employed Accordingly, Creating Hope. We thought that if we're going to set out to make a difference in our schools, we should actually call the work what it is. And so our PLAUSE schools are being referred to as REACH schools, and we have identified different unique challenges that our REACH schools exhibit on a daily basis, and we feel that these REACH schools call for something different. And part of that difference is the need for additional resources to help them take some of the unique challenges that they face and help them deal with that. And the REACH committee is designed to ensure that a lack of resources don't become a barrier in these schools. And you can see some of the barriers that these schools do face, and this is exactly what the district and schools are hoping to overcome. So what is REACH? REACH is a district-level committee that works together to provide a systems approach to support and move the work forward. You can see that a REACH committee was formed in January of 2016. A variety of departments at the district level have come together on a weekly and sometimes more frequent basis to provide supports and resources to these schools. It's important to realize that when we work with the schools, yes, the focus is on the schools because the schools need to do things differently, but equally important, it is important that we focus at the district because the district needs to do things differently to support these schools. And so when you take a look at research around turnaround schools, you're looking at the school but also the district level to make those changes.
So the purpose of the REACH committee is to come together and do a variety of tasks to decide how to deploy resources and which resources are the best to deploy. They are our advisory group. They help us diagnose issues that negatively affect student achievement through school observation and the use of data. They can facilitate a consistent, equitable process that will analyze the school's future needs and determine how and what differentiated supports are necessary and how they're going to be employed. This is an ongoing progress monitoring process, so we come together and we will meet to determine if, in fact, the supports that we have put into the schools are doing what we had thought they are going to do, and that is increase student achievement and make it a healthier school. And we also, the committee also ensures accountability and success in each school, because that is our end product. So as you can see, we have 12 elementary schools and 5 secondary schools that have been identified as our REACH schools. We came to the identification of these schools through several data points. First of all was the Nebraska Department of Education persistently low achieving schools list that comes out on an annual basis. The second point was schools that are consistently performing below the 50th percentile in the areas of reading and math. And also, we thought our priority schools, the turnaround schools, and the schools participating in the purposely built community should also be a part of this effort, because the resources that we put to those schools look a bit different than the other schools that we serve. We know this is a huge effort, and we also realize that the Office of School Support and Supervision cannot do this alone. So you'll be hearing from other members of our committee. In essence, you saw them in one of the first slides. And the first department you're going to hear from is the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. So with that, I'm introducing Dr. Kerberg.
Thanks. We knew last fall that we had to do something differently for these schools. Is this working? Or can I? Okay. Okay, good. And so one of the things we started planning actually last spring and summer is, how do we deploy our staff differently? How do we put more supervisors with more time in the buildings that have the highest needs? So that was something we started talking about immediately, is making sure that our supervisors within curriculum instruction assessment, particularly at the elementary level, were supporting these particular schools. The other thing we took advantage of was professional development dollars we have in Title I, and redeployed that in part to specifically support our highest need schools with 2 national consultants. That was Dr. Kathy Kennedy, Dr. Rachel Billmeyer, and they actually spent time with teachers and principals 2 times per month at each school. So they really focused on professional development between the supervisors and our national consultants. So that included literacy strategies, curriculum pacing guides, and learning objectives. The reason we highlight that is that gives you a guaranteed and viable curriculum. The only way you can make sure the actual curriculum that's intended is taught is to cross-reference with your learning objectives against the content standards in the curriculum pacing guides. We focused on math strategies, engagement strategies, writer's workshop, school improvement planning, and we looked back at the data. It looks like each of our REACH schools averaged about 40 hours of additional professional development support each semester. Some other things we did on a broader level included providing a professional development menu of national consultants for full and half-day workshops during what's called team time, which are elementary plan days, in-service days, and that was available for all of our REACH schools. That PD menu of consultants was over a half dozen different speakers. The topics were culturally relevant as well as interpersonal, student-teacher relationships, including also a focus on academic achievement. And you can see a list of some of those speakers. That's not all of them, but just really top drawer people working on a variety of different topics as mentioned. And then, of course, we were very engaged with our turnaround schools, Wakanda and Kennedy, to make sure those new models were being implemented with all the curricular supports that were needed. And then the last slide of additional supports that we were engaged in was doing some very specific data for a day visits, where our team of supervisors would spend an entire day, perhaps at South High or whatever school it might be, visiting all classrooms, over 100 classroom visits, taking and aggregating the data from those visits, meeting with the building principals, and really talking about, in the leadership team, what did we see in this snapshot of today? what was being implemented in terms of our instructional framework, the gradual release, what was happening with engagement or literacy strategies, so that they could actually have some aggregated data for that data for a day review. Data digs occurred with deep analysis of student performance to inform and improve instruction. We did a lot with school improvement plan reviews, checks, make sure it's aligned with academic action plan, OPS strategic plan. Our elementary instructional support from elementary supervisors, we typically have them 3 days out of 5 in the buildings. All of our supervisors spend the majority of their time in classrooms, in buildings, supporting teachers. But these particular supervisors, we redeployed into our higher need schools and had less time in the schools that weren't as high need. And then at secondary, we had lots of presentations from secondary curriculum supervisors, team meetings, department meetings. They did modeling of lessons. We provided some additional secondary math coach support, as well as a national consultant in mathematics, Dr. Steve Leinwand. So that gives you kind of a gamut of the additional supports provided last year in the 15-16 school year.
Mrs. Farmer is out in the hallway with some reporters, so we're going to pass up her slide and give her an opportunity to come back in a few minutes and talk about how she's strategically supporting the communication piece for our REACH schools. Mr. Lararu?
Through the Office of Equity and Diversity, we are in collaboration with Minnesota Humanities Center. Minnesota Humanities Center has a contract or a grant that they worked on with a donor to be able to support our district in a really substantial way over the next 3 years. And they currently have a variety of partner schools, 8 of which are our REACH schools. And they'll continue to work with them in strategies related to the Minnesota Humanities Center. But also, they will be adding additional schools next year and then the year after, 5 new partner schools per year. And so we are in communication with them about the needs for the inclusion of some of the REACH schools in their additional selections over next year and the year after, so that we are tailoring those offerings to the buildings that need them most. One important thing, though, is that the Minnesota Humanities Center currently offers all of their classes, their workshops, their professional development for all of our district schools and personnel. So if you are an OPS employee, you are able to be involved in that. So even the current schools that are not one of their partner schools have the opportunity to have their members involved. That's not the right button. Okay, so in looking at the perspective of how they align with our district, the Office of Equity and Diversity has a steering committee designed to work around how we are partnering with external organizations to move forward our work. And so we look at each one in terms of our strategic plan and how they fit with the needs of our district. So in our Safe, Healthy, and Engaged Schools, 4 of their offerings fit strongly within this. So it's increased student engagement through absent narratives, innocent classrooms, and secrets to motivating students. For the curriculum-based piece of it, of rigorous curriculum and effective instruction and the high expectation, the Reconstructing Curriculum 1 and 2 are really essential to taking a look at the rigor within the classroom and also being able to identify within the structures of the coursework how they adjust that to the students that they are teaching. And then the community narrative curriculum team also assists with that. For committed, diverse, and effective teachers and administration and staff, this is what the entire intent of the partnership with Minnesota Humanities Center is for. However, there are some particular cohorts, professional learning communities, the principal cohort, school action team, and teacher leadership cohort that really give an opportunity for direct conversation that is both between fellow principals, fellow teachers, and then tying in with the school action team that pulls the entire team at a building together. In the areas of equitable, efficient systems and resources, these particular capacity pieces that are put in place here is, again, another one of the main resources that the Minnesota Humanities Center offers us. The main element that they want to do is making sure that the programming is meaningful for each of the schools. And so therefore, a lot of the interaction that happens is relationship-based, such that they can develop the nuanced changes that need to happen within a core curriculum while staying true to the purpose of each of the professional offerings that they have. It's also, again, bounced off of each of our district-wide goals. And so we take a look at what's being offered and the discussions that happen and say, how does this advance the goals of the district? How does this move forward our strategic plan? Engage and empower parents and families with this. The family engagement element is strongest in the Community Voices Forum, Immersions About Place, and Story Circles. And they do a lot to connect families with the school, but also for the administrators and the staff as well to work on a variety of different strategies together for the benefit of the students. Involved in supporting community partners, the Immersion About Place experience is the really strongest area for that. This takes the community partners and a group of members who are signed up for that, teachers, administrators, staff, counselors, et cetera, who go out to the Immersions About Place, and they learn about the communities in which those schools are located. And partnering with that are community businesses, nonprofit organizations, cultural organizations, whomever is in that area serving that community. This gives an opportunity to be immersed in that, not the type of tour that you may have heard about in the past where you're on a bus and you're driving through a community, pointing out the window and saying, hey, this is where they do whatever. It's actually being out and immersed within the community and given the chance for those individuals to be directly involved in the education of the administrators and staff in any of our buildings. And then accessible, transparent, and two-way communications. Primarily the absent narratives really fits for this. What often happens is our students do not have, or our parents do not have, opportunities without someone thinking, what is the narrative that I'm missing as my staff position, whether it's security or a counselor or a social worker, administrator, a teacher, what narrative am I not understanding about my students, and how can I learn that narrative? How can I learn about that absent narrative to be able to affect how I interact and build relationships? And so Minnesota Humanities Center is the primary equity and diversity opportunity professional development that we're utilizing not only district-wide but especially with our REACH schools. Thank you.
How many presenters do we have with this?
How many presenters do you have?
27 slides, right? How many individual presenters? I just, go ahead. How many presenters?
We have 8 total presenting.
8 total? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening. Please know that Ms. Kanoki and I worked together on this. We actually arm wrestled in the back table to see who would present. I won, obviously, since I hit the gym a few more days a week than she does, I think. Human resources supporting REACH is really all about getting the right staff in the right place to best support the students. We know that teachers matter hugely, and with curriculum, with all of our sports, if we don't have a great teacher in that classroom, and by teacher I'm including any staff member that works with a kid, then we're not doing the right thing. So human resource support really is divided into 3 strategic areas: a strategic staffing approach, recruiting and hiring support, and professional development on human resource-based topics. Strategic staffing is going back and looking at what each individual building needs. We would staff a Howard Kennedy and a purpose-built school model very differently than when we might staff a Druid Hill or a South High. So talking with individual principals, talking with the ED, and looking at how we can best support that building with staff. Some of the immediate changes we've made at the elementary level is adding a full-time student support liaison, an SSL, to each REACH building that does not have an assistant principal already to provide effective administrative support as they work with their kids. We've also looked at increasing paraeducator support at primary and intermediate levels for elementary to better support intervention needs in the buildings. Continuing to look at student-teacher opportunities. We all know that student teaching is both a learning experience but also a semester-long interview. And we know that often teachers are afraid of certain schools because of reputation or because of a variety of things, and getting student teachers in those buildings, in those classrooms, working with kids is the best way to recruit them. They get in the buildings, they fall in love with the buildings, they fall in love with the kids, and it's a much easier recruiting job. Plus, they begin to learn that building-specific approach. And then finally, working with individual buildings to support scheduling of teachers and students to provide that professional development and to provide professional and human resource topics. Recruiting and hiring support. Recruiting and hiring for some of our lower achieving schools can be difficult, and unfortunately they have a higher turnover than many of our other buildings and more first-year or newer teachers. So working with principals to help recruit and hire and how they can sell their building. Teachers have choices now. We have a national teacher shortage, and we know that. Teachers have many offers oftentimes, even within our own district. So why should I go to school A as opposed to school B, and how do I build that relationship, and what sort of things should I tell my teachers as they're coming into interview? Recruiting directly and specifically for REACH schools, and I'm picking a little bit on Howard Kennedy tonight, and I do apologize for that. But we advertised Howard Kennedy differently because it was a different approach. So teachers knew walking in what they were applying for and had that up front. And then providing REACH principals opportunities to recruit at regional universities. Our principals and our teachers often are our best recruiters. And getting them out of those places, not only do they recruit for the district, but they often recruit, actually not often, they always recruit for their own school first, and I don't blame them. So giving them those opportunities to do that. And then finally, professional development and topics based on individual needs, ranging from recruiting to retention to plan of improvements and evaluations. REACH schools with the more frequent new teachers involved in their schools often have more of these issues as teachers are learning how to be teachers in buildings and learning that professionalism. So the evaluations are more frequent at REACH buildings because of where the teachers are at in their careers. And how do we address this in a positive way that help teachers grow and develop as we move forward? Really, the HR support is about providing the right staff at the right time, at the right place, at the right level to best support our buildings. I was told to be quick.
And I might be quicker. So what IMS does around our REACH schools is we take our case framework, which we adopted via the ESU this last year. It helps us build our technology plan. We sit down with the executive director, those principals, and any other curricular leaders and consult with those schools to help them build a plan around how the classroom, how access those skills and that environment. It's much more than just technology, but it's tying things back to what Dr. Kerberg talked about in best practices. And we sit down with those groups and we have ongoing meetings to help see those through. And I think it's a great program. Actually, today there was a meeting at one of the schools earlier today that I was able to be a part of. Supporting data, we obviously we have the coaching tool, we have the grading dashboard coming, behavior dashboard. You see Wakanda's here to give an update tonight. They were one of our schools that participated in building the program for PLCs with Microsoft. So that was a great avenue for developing the depth in professional development. So you heard many times PLCs being talked around this and how we move in the future. You know, we're going to put data in the hands of our teachers and really inform them on how they need to change instruction. And then the MIE program. So after this year, we have 2 MIE trainers at every building in the district. We take that one step further with these PLAS schools and helping them to get to that depth with integrating the MIE program at a much further level than what we have at the other schools. So, and then Wakanda, I'll let Wakanda talk about Wakanda. So it's great.
All right. So one of the things that Dr. Kerberg already mentioned is that with this, we did align some CIA support to our department, and we actually have them here with us tonight, so I'm just going to have them stand as I say their name. Val Skovanec cannot join us tonight, but we have Mickey Holbeck, Latasha Muhammad, Leah Weeks, and also Danita Webb, who works with us as a project manager with Wakanda and Howard Kennedy. So we just want to welcome them to our team as part of our support. Thank you, ladies. So one of the other things that we were thinking about in regards to this support is really looking at time intensive. So how do we provide more support in the buildings in order to help move curriculum, instruction, and things that are happening within the buildings? So one of the things that we have talked about with these supervisors is the whole idea of 60 to 75% of their time in schools, boots on the ground, working with principals, working with teachers, and how do we help move the work? So with that, when you're looking at the executive director role, which is obviously being responsible along with the principals and moving student achievement, they also join us in that vision. So collectively being responsible for what happens with student achievement in our buildings. So with that, going along with the whole notion that we had around Advocates for Hope, which is we're changing the trajectory of what's happening in our schools. So just really being advocates for this whole process and the change that we're undertaking and making our schools be better tomorrow than they are today, which is our goal. So along with that, we've talked about that whole notion of being thought partners in the work, which means we're not doing things to principals, but we're working alongside them in effort to move to where we need to be. So going into that, we've actually done kind of a theory of action, and this that you're seeing up here is something that we not only did with the supervisors, we actually had REACH principals also as well that weighed in on this here. So looking at this, obviously our vision that you see at the end there is improve student achievement. So what we talked about is how do we get there? So like if we do these things, then we'll see the ultimate vision at the end, which is improve student achievement. So some of the things that we did in the activities is we worked, first of all, individually with our new supervisors, but then we also paired it with what we heard the principals say to come up with the right mix of how we're going to address the work. So you see things on there like work with the school leadership team to implement the school improvement plan. Also training and coaching identified teachers, facilitating the planning and implementation of professional development, and then the continuous learning piece was also something critical that was talked about during the principals meeting.
And with that being said, we know from past experience and just from common sense that you cannot just throw people or money at a problem. You have to change the mindset, the practices, and the behaviors of what it is that you're doing in order to get a different outcome. And so when Mr. Evans and the executive directors worked with HR with regards to repurposing those 4 outstanding young ladies, 5 that we talked about, we wanted to make certain that when we work with them, we weren't just moving them from one department to the next, even though the skill sets are there, that we really wanted to create a system and a support around what the work's going to look like in theory, but most importantly in practice. And so we facilitated some team building activities with ourselves as well as our new team members regarding how is this transition going to work differently to make sure that we have boots on the ground and we're walking alongside principals and not doing something to them, but with them. And as you can see, those were some of the actions that we all came up with that also aligned with principals, that principals really wanted people in their buildings consistently that they would have a critical access to resources in buildings, advocating for hope, leading learning, and building that collective efficacy and not just being there once a month, but being there maybe 2 or 3 times a week if need be. And there we are facilitating activities. One really critical piece really centers around the research department because we know without data we just have an opinion. And so we facilitated an activity where we did a culture walk, a data dig with the schools, our REACH schools and our new REACH supervisors, and gave them an opportunity to really look at the schools that they would be serving and not just have particularly an opportunity to go out to the schools, but really look at what's on paper and to start formulating what the school improvement plans and what the data says is what we think may need to happen before we facilitated a meeting with the principals. And as you can see, there's the last one I really want to focus on is the link between theory and action, really putting what we talk about to work. And as we know that the voice of the principals is critical, and so we did not want to just say to the principals, oh, we have four or 5 new people working alongside you. We facilitated a series of meetings with principals that started back last fall that said, We know you have struggles. What are your true barriers? What are the issues that you're having that have been impeding increased student achievement? And we literally listen to their input and their feedback with regards to, these are the issues we have, we need help. And we need to do things differently in order to get a different result. And as we have found out in our roles the last 2 years, that a system is designed to do exactly what it does. And we have not done things differently when we look at our REACH schools or our lowest performing schools. And so this year, as you could hear from our colleagues, we really rallied the departments and said, we have to do things differently. This is what the principals said that they need. Let's do it. And CIA provided wraparound services with a culmination of hands-on professional development, allowed more support in those buildings to work alongside struggling teachers. And one thing that we did that I'd really like to point out with the principals is we talked about what are your hopes and fears of REACH. And I'm going to be quite honest, principals said, are you pulling us down here again to get our input, to stack it on a shelf to say that we gave our input? No, they were very frank and very candid about, we want to see some action. And I'm going to tell you, they're going to get it. When we held a meeting with our principals, the last 2 meetings, we gave them the opportunity to talk about what does it look like in theory and practice to have a highly qualified individual walking alongside you as a thought partner. And to be quite honest, their theory about the role of the REACH supervisor pretty much aligned with what the REACH supervisor envisioned, as well as our theory of action. And that's how we came up with the document of what their role looks like and what it does not look like as well. And through that, we were able to come up with some identified strategic supports. And I want to go back to a meeting that we just had a little over a week ago with our principals. Mr. Wakefield, the other departments that were here today, shared the next steps for the 16-17 year. And I was kind of off to the side, and when Mr. Wakefield said that through strategic planning with the budget office, that we are giving each one of you a full-time school support liaison, one principal jumped up and said, I feel like I'm on the Oprah Winfrey show. And I'm not exaggerating, that you mean you're giving us what we need? You're giving us a highly qualified administrator to walk alongside of us and help us move the work? And that came directly from the feedback of the principals. And one principal, and I think it was Mr. Deco Jean-Baptiste, said, this is the first time that the district has actually heard our pleas and is giving us the support that we need to do things differently. And so through the process of bringing the principals to the table and bringing the district departments to the table, we are on the cusp of actually doing things differently. And I'm pretty certain from what we've already seen and what we have planned that the theory is going to move to action, and we're going to see continued results with the support of the data department, the research department. And then at the conclusion of that meeting, we had the opportunity to bring our REACH supervisors together with our principals for introductory meetings. And, you know, it was kind of a fun activity to get to know you. But when you put highly qualified people together and you change the course of the work with input, you will get a different structure in the output. And so without further ado, that takes us to what we've done differently at our 2 schools that you're about to hear from. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Tony Gunter from Howard Kennedy. And here are 2 examples of doing things differently to get 2 different outputs.
Thank you very much. This is on. All right. Well, we're getting that sorted out. We'll, looks like that's in a PDF format, so I can't advance it here, but that's okay. You know, when we talk about Kennedy's transformation, it's really more or less more than just implementing 8 key elements that we talked about in the beginning of, you know, hiring that highly effective administrator and staff, that embedded professional development. Thank you. That focus on literacy and early learning and the whole STEAM and long-range school is way beyond that. And what I discovered was, like you've heard much today about this systems approach, that's exactly what we're creating at Howard Kennedy, is a system that really helps change the building capacity of the adults and the collaboration and pedagogy, so where kids at all ranges can succeed. And that system is not designed for the kids, it's designed for the adults. And that's something you have to keep in mind, because if something goes wrong with the system, we're the ones who have to look at to make the adjustments. So when I look through, all right, let's try. I don't know if I'm plugged in, folks. I know there's a tech guy in here somewhere. Yeah. Is it still in PDF? All right, just scroll it for me, please, if you don't mind.
Click on the minus button.
I'm just gonna keep rolling, if that's okay. All right. So the greatest thing about this whole process is, finding the right fit. That was our challenge, and I love a challenge. But when we talk about finding a right fit, we're looking for staff members to have the whatever it takes attitude, the mentality to where they hold themselves accountable for the success of all kids and not just my class. So we did a lot of research with my executive director, Mrs. Comine, and Human Resources to find the right questions and the right approach to find the right fit. And one of the most important questions that we ask is, why do you want to work at Howard Kennedy? And that's kind of what that picture is right there. She wants to empower students to triumph over adversity. That's pretty powerful, because when you know why you want to do something, it really identifies your purpose. And everyone must have a purpose in what they do. And that purpose also defines what we do, which is way more powerful than anything else. So that was a very important question that we asked. And when I look at the staff profile, and this is based off of 30 staff members that's currently hired that are certified staff members. We're going from 22 full-time certified staff members and 18 non-certified last year to 33 certified and 22 non-certified staff members right now. Average years of experience, it will be 8 years for us coming up, which is pretty powerful. As Mr. Wakefield mentioned earlier, it's really hard to find staff that want to work in the inner city. And my challenge was really making sure that we're finding people who are running from something, but they're running to something, that they want to be there. Advanced degrees, this is based off of 2014-15 current Kennedy staff, where 51% had advanced degrees, and upcoming year is 55%. So these numbers are pretty close. But some of the most important thing is 23% were currently certified staff members at Kennedy, 53% were new from within OPS, and 23 certified teachers were new to OPS. Okay, so 23 currently there were rehired, 53 were within the district, and 23% were coming from outside the district. And out of the 23 outside the district, 10% of them had some teaching experience. So I got a pretty well-balanced staff coming in to support our kids. But I think the most important piece is, we do have some new positions. We have a Dean of STEAM, which is currently out on professional development right now. A Dean of Culture, which is Mr. Joe Eckerman, and a Dean of Literacy, Ms. Nancy Mark. And they're part of my leadership team, and we work collaboratively together to really make sure that this system works. We also have a part-time social worker, a full-time school psychologist, which is something that we really feel will have a direct impact, especially when we look at our MTSSB, system that we're implementing at Howard Kennedy, and a literacy center teacher where they focus directly on literacy, kids who are who need some extra support, the underrepresented student in the school, and same thing with the math center. But the biggest percentage I want everyone to understand is 100% of my staff, they have a belief and a personal responsibility for every child, for every single child. And, whether they come in below grade level or on grade level, they are there for the students. And they have a passion to make it work. Will you go to the next slide, please? Because I'm going to make sure I don't take up too much time. But
You got to go to the.
Early childhood, the cradle to college pipeline is a huge, huge piece of the success that I saw down at Drew, and it really happened around their year 7, and we're kind of starting at that time. And with the support of the Early Childhood Department, CIA, we made a little shift to where we went from 6 half-day sections to 3 all-day sections of early childhood classrooms that are inclusive. So we had to get the word out. So we, during parent-teacher conferences with booths set up, I sat in the hallway, grabbed parents as they're coming by. In the classrooms, we had flyers going out. Head Start sent out postcards. We did a robocall. I had a staff member put flyers in churches. I went to every classroom and said, hey, how many kids have a sibling at home? Raise your hand. Took all their names, took all their addresses, and I put them in a map. So those stars are some of the places I went door to door handing out flyers. It was a little tiresome. I can't tell you I reached all 100% of those stars, but you see the cluster there. Those were our main points. The large cluster in that 75 where that blue circle with the house, that's Howard Kennedy, and that's the Spencer Projects right above it. And the other cluster off of Lake Street, that's the Yale Apartments. About 80% of our kids come from those 2 designated areas. And when we had our enrollment fair, we had 40 parents, 40 families come in and register, and that was a large number. And as of right now, our early childhood slots are closed. And about 98% of them are homeschool attendance area students, which is pretty powerful. The other piece for early childhood right now is working with 75 North and their leadership team with OPS, the Urban League, the Buffer Early Childhood Institute, Buffer Early Learning, UNO, Purpose-Built Schools. We're in the early phase of identifying a plot of land to build our own early childhood center that will go from birth to 8 years old. Notice I said to 8 years old. That's a pretty good span because we want to make sure that pipeline comes right to Howard Kennedy and we build that capacity within our building. Perfect. Hey, we're getting it now. Dr. Kerberg mentioned this earlier with the a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So we did a lot of research on some curriculum resources, and we sat down with my building support team, Purpose-Built Schools, my leadership team, and we went through. The first column is Journeys. We can't quite see it. The second column is Reading Street, and that's what Drew used in their school starting 15 years ago. And then Ready Gen, which is a new version of Reading Street. So we just kind of went through, the most important pieces and found that, we're going to go with Journeys 2017, which is a much updated version of Journeys that we're using right now. A lot of materials were identified to be very supportive for tiered intervention and very supportive for kids who just need a little extra support. This is one of my favorite slides because when we talk about an RTI or response to intervention, that 3-letter acronym means a lot of different things to different people. So it's very important for all of us to get on the same page. So we did a book study with this particular book and make sure that when we mentioned those 3 letters, we knew exactly what we're referring to and talking about. But this whole RTI system is where learning becomes the constant and time and targeted instruction becomes the variables. In most traditional schools, it's the opposite. So we want to give kids the right amount of targeted instruction, the right amount of time, the right amount of intensity to really target learning. You want to, perfect, okay, thank you. You know, we talk about the whole STEAM process, and we're going to work our way up to STEAM, but I have to share with you that these 4 slides is just something that we're going to get started, but the whole piece of robotics and aquaponics, there's a little young man in the tie, you can't quite see it, but he has a violin in his hand, and then the Walt Disney Experience. We're going to implement the Disney in Schools program as a grant that we were awarded. So all of our 3rd through 5th grade students will go through putting on a Disney play or production to really help support our arts. And you probably heard the Sprouts program. Superintendent Evans tweeted about it this past weekend. Over 900 early childhood students learning how to play the violin or some type of woodwind, not woodwind, but you know, instrument, strings instrument. We're looking at starting that at Howard Kennedy. And the history there was, you know, some time ago, someone in the community donated a bunch of violins to our school. So I want to kind of resurrect that because it's kind of went by the wayside. So that's a huge piece we're going to put in place. But that and project-based learning is one of those things that it's a sense of readiness that we'll implement and put in place. I think you rushed me along. I got it. Okay. You know, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and if you can, you know, if you could zoom in and see some of the kids' faces, it was very enjoyable to go around to the school, to all the classrooms, and talk to the students and share with them what's happening at our school. I went into all the testing was done, so it wouldn't be a distraction. But we told them, you know, why Howard Kennedy and what we're doing and what the goals are, and you know, for us being a you know, top 15% of schools in 10 years and top 5% of light schools in 10 years. And you know, I showed them graphs of our data and everything. But it really hit home when I showed them videos of the students down at Drew who look just like them. And they're doing all these things to incorporate their learning through project-based learning and STEAM and just even in math, and they're in awe. You know, are we going to do this? Like, absolutely. So, you know, I had to share with them what's coming around the corner so that we could build that enthusiasm for next year. But the most important thing about that slide was making sure they knew the start time and end time for next year so they can get to school on time. You know, this is, I guess I thought, that is one of my favorite slides too, because this represents a lot of collaboration. And, you know, we talk about thought partners. There's so many thought partners on that screen. But in the middle of that, I have to credit, you know, my executive director, Mrs. Comine, to understand and really implement her role of leadership in all these departments. And when we had meetings, because having someone to create a very flat environment, despite of her role and her responsibilities, knowing when to, you know, step aside and let other people lead, or when to step in and thank you. That was great. To support everyone. I mean, she had the right balance, not to, you know, take over this push and pull. So, I mean, you see all those folks up there. Like I said, I have a thought partner right now through our building support team, Val Skovanek, and she is down in Atlanta going through Singapore math training with my my STEAM teacher and my math center teacher. And we'll go to the next one. Support. And, you know, when you look that up, you know, support means a lot of different things to everyone, but after going through the residency, purpose-built schools and purpose-built community, they're not leaving our side. They're going to provide support for us not only this year, but in the years to come. So having a new network of administrators and network of people throughout the entire nation is major. And they put together kind of an idea of coming back to Kennedy for some from leadership training development through literacy, through math, early learning. Maybe it's twice a month, 3 to 5 times monthly, where they shadow me and kind of just say, you know what, things are going great, or we need to focus more on this. So that support isn't going away with that organization. So I'm very pleased with that. And my last and final slide, wow, is welcome aboard. We're having a week-long professional development onboarding process for staff next week. It's about 35 to 40 hours of PD, looking at the actual instructional model that we're using, and making sure that we establish all those relationships and clarifying expectations of one another, but most importantly, develop that culture of learning through this whole process. But when we look at the agenda, we have purpose-built schools, purpose-built community, 75 North, the OPS district staff, all being part of that whole process of onboarding. So that must be my cue to stop. So it's a very, very strong process that we're putting through and creating this system of connectedness. We went so fast, I'm going to go ahead and not forget one important thing of our Senate School Day. Our kids are going 5 additional days, starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, going to 4 o'clock, which totals about 12,640 additional minutes. And it's really not about the amount of time, but how we spend that time. And that time is on instruction.
So with that, thank you, Mr. Gunter. I'm going to call up Ms. Ebony Harvey, principal at Wakanda, and her staff. So I will tell you, it's hard to believe that we are a year in on this project, but I will tell you, when you looked at the research on turnaround work, one of the first things it said you had to get right was hire the right principal. And where do you find that right principal? Chisholm Elementary in Wichita, Kansas, let me say. No partiality to the name, but you find them at Chisholm Elementary. But in all seriousness, what you're going to see today is one of my favorite quotes is Nelson Mandela, which says, education is the most powerful weapon which you can give someone to change the world. And thinking about what is being provided to the students at Wakanda because of the work of all the individuals at this table is that weapon of education, which was our goal when we set out doing this, which was what you see at the bottom, but this is making sure that the kids at Wakanda will be better off tomorrow than they are today. So I couldn't be more proud of just the work that has been done, and I give all the credit to the individuals that are at this table. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Ms. Harvey and her team.
Thank you so much for having us here today. So we want to just go ahead and talk to you a little bit about how our year has gone with the turnaround process, and we'll be able to show you some data as well. So we want to go ahead and get started. As Dr. Chisholm mentioned, better tomorrow than we are today, that is our mission and our vision at Wakanda. We are leaders, or excuse me, we are a community of leaders. We recognize excellence and celebrate the greatness within us, and that's for every child and also every staff member. Leadership, excellence, greatness, we lead by example, excel in all we do, achieve goals together at our highest potential, and do what is right. So we, as I mentioned before, when we came in October, my main focus this year was culture, collaboration, and community. So we wanted to make sure that with the turnaround process, we really kept in mind that we really did come and turn these babies' worlds upside down, and we took away everything that they really have known, the familiar faces and things of that nature. So it was really important for us to establish a culture that was conducive for learning, and to really focus on the whole child, and while we're also thinking about student achievement as well. So as I mentioned back in October, these are the things that kind of led us to our positive school culture. We did do the 7 Habits of Happy Kids, which is by Stephen Covey. We also focused on professional learning communities that we'll talk about in a little bit. We also did take a visit, some teachers, myself, Dr. Chisholm, and our project manager. We also went to Chicago, and just to be able to see a turnaround process, because it's new, not just for the district, but also for the state. And we also implemented CHAMPS. So CHAMPS was basically our school-wide proactive and positive approach to classroom management. Coming from Wichita, we did have MTSS, so we really wanted to make sure that we made everything universal for our kiddos, because we needed to provide them some consistency. So we did implement CHAMS school-wide. It's a universal behavior program that, again, like I said, it makes it very consistent for our students. We went through a process of making rules and routines and procedures and all of that universal. So we actually scripted everything out so that teachers could have the same common language, and when students go throughout our building, it's the same, so that it was consistent. So these are just examples of posters that is a consistent common practice that we have within our schools, but before along with this, we do have scripted procedures and routines that we do roll out to, that the teachers did, and we do roll out to the students as well. This is, again, we want to make sure, again, that we are focusing on the whole child, but we also do focus on academics as well. So this is what we call our Wildcat board, that students will come in and they know what is expected of them every day in all of the subject areas. And we wanted to make sure that we can kind of build some stamina throughout the day to keep them focused, because we did have a longer day at Wakanda. So we wanted to make sure that we, again, are thinking about the whole child in that sense. This is basically our checklist, and this is kind of how we monitor all of the things that I talked about before. We wanted to make sure that we didn't just implement things, but we also sustain it as well. So I'm going to have my behavior coach, and she's going to talk about how all of these different components has helped our behavior.
Thank you for allowing us to come talk with you today. When we started at Wakanda at the beginning of the year, we had really changed these kids' lives. And so the first day of school was not only a shock for them, but I think it was a shock for myself. At maybe the first day of school, we had students who were just having some struggles right away at the beginning. And so what we did was we started to look at these students as individuals. We started to work with them, putting them on plans, giving them some positive reinforcements. We put in the 7 habits, we put in CHAMPS to give them some consistency, so that even though we had taken a lot of things away from them, we needed to bring back that consistency for them. So as the year continued and we put in the CHAMPS and we brought in 7 habits, we were able to see our students starting to decrease in behaviors, decrease in behavior referrals down to our office. We were also able to implement some things such as no referral classrooms. It became a very big motivator for a lot of our classrooms. The kids were very excited if their whole classroom could make it 5 days without anyone being sent out of the classroom. It became kind of a competition, and then they worked together to be able to meet that goal. We also implemented the Wildcat Dash, and this was very exciting for the students. Each month we did a habit 1 through 7, and at the end of the month the teachers would pick 2 students. They would get to come in the hallway, and this is the only time that they get to run. Otherwise they have to use their hallway expectations, but at this point in time they would get their name called, they would run from myself to Miss Harvey and back, and they received a certificate and a charm, which, if you can see the charms, they all have a bracelet that they can earn charms. They can earn charms in music, they can earn charms in PE, they can earn charms anywhere in the building. And so you can see some of the students that were able to receive some of those awards. We also have positive office referrals. So it's not that you just always have to come to the office if something is not going okay or going right. You can come down to the office and have some positive time down in the office with Ms. Harvey or myself if you get a positive office referral. We also worked off some WOW bucks. So anyone in the building, whether any adult in the building can give a student a WOW buck. The importance of that was that that student knew exactly what they were doing to earn that WOW buck. And then we did drawings on Fridays. The students would come down and could pick something. And so then we also have just different ways to show how students were doing in the classroom.
Okay, good evening. I'm Nina Hewitt, 4th grade teacher at Wakanda Elementary. Thank you for having us this evening. Our PLCs is an excellent tool where we took the Wildcat board that you saw. We also put that into the into the computer, and we collaborate with our grade level teachers. At the beginning of the year, we were collaborating across grade levels, but then as the year progressed, we then just collaborate with our own grade level. But we record all of the conversations, the strategies that the students need to bring up their data or their scores. We also have our data that it's uploaded into that. The thing that I really like about it is that I can go back in time and take a look at what we discussed at the beginning of the year and then how we have progressed. We can use goal setting, put that up in there, and it's just a really good tool to help us focus and record what we've discussed, what the students need.
And with the PLCs, as Rob Dixon did mention, it is a digital notebook, so other teachers are able to do some vertical teaming as well. And let's see what third grade's talking about so that they can also meet the needs of those kids and also get ideas from colleagues about how to meet the needs of other students as well. So here's some map data. Our school is unique as we do map data from kindergarten all the way up to 6th, and I know the district does do second grade and 6th grade, but we do the whole school. So in our reading scores, you can see that at most grade levels in reading, there was positive growth from the beginning of the year. So this chart really just shows the small chart really shows from the fall to the spring and how much increase the students made. And then you can see the progression from fall, winter, and spring. So we were really pleased to have double digits in most of the grade levels. We always look back at our data and we try to find root causes and talk about what we need to do to fix the areas that are not growing so well. And then we also want to talk about what are the root causes of why they did so well and how can we incorporate that also in those grade levels. So that's what we have in reading. If you look here, it just shows really the percentage of students making growth. And so we were still pleased again as we break it down at a more student level. The percentage of kids, everything is above 50%, which is huge for us. Obviously, the dark blue shows that there's still some kids that we still have work to do, so we do know that. In math, every grade level made us a growth in math. And again, the small chart shows from fall to spring. So double digits. Again, in those other areas, we, again, look at root causes and we have those conversations and really look at the research department really shows or has a data notebook that we can look for to analyze the data. So we really do use those to really, again, drive our instructions. But again, if you just look, I mean, they're all stepping stones, and that was what we were aiming for. So they really made significant growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And it's really more significant because we did have a lot of behaviors. And so to have kids coming in and out of the classroom but still be able to, our goal is to get them back into the classroom so that they are not missing out on instruction. So it was really, we were really happy with our results. We know again that we do still have work to do. As this slide would show as well, the amount of students or the percentage of students making growth. The light blue is the kids making growth, and the dark blue is the kids that are not making growth, but we do know that we have work to do. So we, again, look at it. We do celebrate the progress we've made, but we do understand that we do have work to do as well.
I'm Missy Wadaszewski. I teach third grade at Wakanda. I think the technology was probably the part that I was most excited about. I just love technology. It's the 21st century. The kids know how to run technology better than most of us do. So this year we became a Microsoft Showcase school, which was pretty cool. We had Microsoft coming in and out and doing some trainings with the PLCs and stuff like that with us. We had 3 MIE teachers, myself being one of them. We have a technology coach who was absolutely phenomenal this year. I know she worked really closely with Mr. Dixon and just brought some amazing things to Wakanda and really helped us out. And she also was able to, with new technology, you're going to have that professional development. So she was always able and willing to, give teachers ideas, come in and do some co-teaching, whatever professional development needs they might have. She was willing and did that. I think for a while there we had like Technology Tuesdays or something, just a new kind of technology tool. Teachers come, learn something new, especially using like OneNote or the things within like the Office 365 components as well. So we, in my classroom, rolled out the one-to-one, the Surfaces, and it was fantastic. I don't know if you see kind of the left-hand corner there, a young lady working on her Surface. She was my student who probably all of first semester going into second semester had no desire to do anything school-related. She would, unfortunately, I know you kind of talked about students who would leave the classroom. She was one of them. But we brought out the technology and her engagement and actually her progress. It was a little bit of progress, but progress is progress, especially with a child who did not want to do anything at all. So that was fantastic. Just, I think, the engagement, that was huge. And then having the opportunity to do the wireless, that was probably one of the coolest things. Just as a teacher in that proximity, I could not be teaching up at the board and then being close to maybe, kind of a talker. So having the wireless ability with my Surface to go around and just kind of have that proximity with kids was really beneficial. They loved it. We did a lot of things within OneNote. I'm excited about what we can even do with upcoming second graders and rolling them out at the beginning of the year, and just all of the amazing things that we will be able to do with that.
And as I mentioned before, parent and community engagement was important to us as well. We do have some plans to do some things differently next year, but we did have a parent university to just kind of talk about a little bit about the things that we're rolling out with this year. We did establish a parent resource room where parents can come and if they need support or help, if there are parents looking for a job, they can come and get resume help. We did have a lot of parents, or a couple parents come through and they were able to secure a job. And we have a clothing closet in there, a food pantry, things of that nature. So we do have a parent liaison in that room that really just works with the parents and help them with their needs. We also implemented 100 Black Men this year for mentoring with our students, and that was very beneficial for our 5th and 6th grade boys. We had Eagle's Nest, and this upcoming school year for 2016-2017, they will donate school supplies to every student and a brand new backpack to every student. So they have been a really great partner. They also help out during conferences or with staff appreciation, things of that nature. So they're a really good partner. And I'll skip St. Clair Memorial for just a second. We are really excited that next year we will have the CLC program. We were approved to have that, so we'll have that after-school program next year. I was just talking to Gwen on yesterday, and so we're really excited that it's going to be beneficial for our kids, just an additional support for them. St. Clair Memorial has come to our school to provide intervention tutors, and they also established a homework club, and I'll let Nina talk a little bit about that because they work with 4th grade.
Yes, they came in. We had volunteers, 2 per classroom every day, and they worked with us in small groups. So we were able to break the students down into much smaller groups and have more of a 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 ratio. And the students really liked it. It really seemed to help them to focus, having somebody else to attend to them. And I do believe that it helped their improvement on their scores on the tests that we took this year. So we really enjoyed having them come and help out.
Additionally, we have Hy-Vee, that's a partner with us, that donates the food to the food pantry in the parent resource room. We have firefighters come out, read with the kids, eat lunch with the kids, and then Woodman Life has donated so much to us, from school supplies to even treadmills for our staff. So we will have a wellness room at Wakanda next year. So we're really excited about that as we incorporate a wellness goal for next year. And one of my quotes, I know Dr. Chisholm quoted Nelson Mandela, but after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. So we do realize that we have made some progress, and we are pleased with the progress that we've made, but we do realize that we still have a lot of work to do. And we want our students, again, to be better tomorrow than we are today.
So that concludes their presentation, but I will say, I'll never forget, over a year ago, and I know Mr. Vargas, you had made some statements around, which I agree, that this turnaround work takes time, and it's challenging and difficult work. And I will say, we do have more work to do, but it's such a joy to see what they've been able to accomplish in just a year. And there's a reason why it's a 5-year grant, but to be able to do what they've done thus far, and we do have a long way to go, I couldn't be happier. And I just want to publicly say, you all deserve to pat yourselves on the back for the work that you've already done, but I know that it's going to continue to get better. So thank you all for your hard work and dedication to this. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all. And I know it's a long presentation, but again, it's a workshop to help us understand better what's happening in our schools so that we can share with folks in the public and with others what's going on. So there was a lot of information, and maybe one of the EDs could kind of recap where we started with the persistently low achieving, and then for the REACH schools, and how work maybe at Wakanda and Kennedy will tie to all of that, to kind of come full circle.
So just to kind of, and I'll kind of start there, is when we were talking about the SIG years ago, one of the questions that we had in conjunction with the SIG conversation is, what are we going to do for all of our schools that are persistently low achieving? So what we wanted to do tonight was kind of capture both aspects of not only what we're doing for Kennedy and Wakanda, but also that we took the charge around what are we going to do for all schools, and wanted to tell you that we have been having conversations, and there is work that we're doing to address the needs of all schools. And I think, like with Mr. Dixon's presentation, there are things that we are taking from Wakanda, from Kennedy, that we are going to be trying to do with all the schools, but then also recognizing the fact that things are differentiated, different strokes for different folks, basically. So one approach might not be the right approach for every school, but what we do need to do is learn from the successes of the programs that we have going. So the whole point of tonight, which it was kind of long, but we really wanted to show you all as a board and the community out there that we don't take this lightly, and that we do have special projects that we have going on, but we also recognize that there's other schools outside of those schools that also need attention and help. So this was kind of our answer to, it's not just about the special things we're doing at these buildings, we're actually trying to make things better for all kids in similar situations. So that was kind of the attempt.
And well done. So thank you. So I'll go to board members that might have questions, and I'll just quickly say I had a wonderful opportunity to visit Wakanda. I've seen the Wildcat board and all of the different things, visited with the 4th grade teacher. And so it is pretty amazing. I would encourage everyone to get the opportunity to go up to Wakanda next year. And it's just unbelievable to walk through that building and see the consistency and the common language that's used, and the kids understand it, and I was just so impressed. So I encourage everybody to go and visit. Ms. Williams.
Well, I don't have really any questions. I just want to say to Mr. Guncher and to Ms. Harvey that one, Ebony presented at the Empowerment Network conference, and I had the opportunity to facilitate that session, and the positive impact that session had on what we're doing as a district by just showcasing Wakanda and the wonderful things that you're doing, and talking about the collaboration that Wakanda and Howard Kennedy is having has really brought great feedback from the community about, wow, oh, we didn't know these things. And, you kind of go, come to a board meeting and hear about some of the great things we have going on. But it was an eye-opener for the community, and so I just wanted to publicly thank both of you for that work. I've had much time in Howard Kennedy and kind of got to see Tony's process from afar, and just I think he's done an amazing job as well, and I'm very excited to get in there. And some of the teachers from other schools that are coming in are so extremely excited. I've never really seen them that excited about teaching. And so I think you've done an incredible job of finding some great staff, and really excited to see the buzz of the building, because being in there for 6 years, this was my last year in that building in 6 years, and to see just the change of the air, the culture of this is going to be this amazing thing, and your work has started, but not really in the school. And so I'm so excited to see what's going to happen, but just very exciting things happening in our district. And Ebony, you said it best, is that progress is progress, but there's progress to be had. But if this is the example that in these schools that we're looking to spread across the district, and individualizing these in every building, I think you are all off to a great start. And Dr. Chisholm, you and your team, kudos to you for that, because honestly, the cards are stacked against you at the beginning of this process, and you've really showed what passion for students and education can be, and you're really leading the way for our district. So I just wanted to thank you all for that incredible amount of work. I have questions, but it's not anything that I can't send an email. I just really wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for doing something new and different. This is a huge change in education in Nebraska. And I love the REACH portion of this as well. I talked to Christina Windsor, the principal at Belvedere, today, and she told me about REACH, and I was like, what's REACH? And she told me about it, and the excitement of her saying, hey, I've been able to hire additional staff members that better reflect our student population, and seeing her excitement. I mean, there's just this buzz about what we're doing, and it started with these two schools, and it's spreading. So I just really want to thank you for your time and your dedication and your passion for our students, and making sure that students are your primary focus. So thank you so much for all your work.
Does anyone else have questions, comments? Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Madam President. The reason why I brought up earlier how many presenters is because, and I'll state this, maybe we could do it better in the future, or figure out that, to me, it seemed like we had 4 different presentations all in one. So there's some questions I had for people right then that, if I didn't jot it down then, you moved on to the next person. And now coming back, trying to figure out what those questions are very difficult. So I'm just being honest with you. If I was a parent or somebody watching, I would be kind of lost in the shuffle. I appreciate you guys presenting, especially about the Wakanda and Howard Kennedy piece. And I have a few questions, but I'm trying to figure out where do I start. So, can we start with equity and diversity? The Sharif, the slide he did with MTS or Minnesota Humanities. Or did he? Oh, he's going to beat me up. He's standing behind me. Yeah? Okay, so your presentation that you did with Minnesota Humanities, what are we in OPS doing differently today than when we were doing probably a year ago when you presented? Because this is, if I'm correct, probably the first time of an update since your original one of what you guys are doing with Minnesota Humanities as well as your department. And that kind of really intrigued me, especially leading into this with the REACH schools. There's so many REACH acronyms nowadays. It's okay.
So what we're doing now is about where we are targeting those efforts. So much of the Minnesota Humanities Center offerings that were originally in place, we are targeting on these particular schools. And the second element is many of the offerings that existed before did not have deeper level actions with them. And so within this structure, you'll see that there's, for example, Reconstructing Curriculum. They have a Reconstructing Curriculum 2. For Innocent Classrooms, there's a second and third version of that. And so over the past year, they've developed, and working with the consultants that teach their offerings and classes, they've provided opportunities for more in-depth look. So whereas the first part of it may have been an introductory to the offerings, the discussion, the conversation, now that those who are going through it say, look, I've got it. I understand that there's a different approach that we need to have in terms of the way we interact with our students. The practitioners part of it is the next level, and that's what we have added to it. Although for some of our schools who hadn't had as many of their staff going through the initial offerings, it gives them an opportunity to get started. And so most of it is about leveraging the majority of the staff within a particular building to take a part of it, so that they have a common language, and that has been the most effective element with implementing Minnesota Humanities Center's offerings and having success, is when a large portion of the staff have gone through the same or similar offerings, and so therefore they're all on the same page and on one accord.
So this is the same conversation I think we kind of had before, that the district, as well as you, amended that you don't want to force teachers to be part of this, and they had to buy into it. You wanted the schools to buy into it. I find it still today that if we don't have everybody on board, how effective is this if it's not everybody within an entire school participating in it? And how do we measure if Minnesota Humanities is effective? Where they were when you came in and where we are right now? I mean, and this is a question not just to you, but it's going to be put to everybody. I would love to have seen where we were when you guys came in and the progress that we are at right now and long-term goals. Because presentation of what you're doing is great, but I want to know how effective it is, and if it's not effective, as a board or we can have a conversation with the superintendent or something of what can we do if we even have the capacity of making it more effective to every school. Does it make sense?
I don't know if you're interested, and I don't want to put Ms. Harvey on the spot, but I do know you guys have done some activities at your building with Minnesota Humanities. I don't know if you just briefly want to speak to that.
I think the activities that we've done with Minnesota Humanities has helped my staff really understand the population of kids that we serve. In conversations with them and reflections with them, that's one thing that they always talked about, just trying to understand students in poverty, understanding students that come from traumatic situations and things of that nature. And I really think it has helped quite a bit. I've seen teachers where they may initially get really not really upset with students, but don't really understand why a student is having a behavior. But I've seen them really understand, okay, the whole child and what's been going on in their worlds, so that they could really think about how they can approach them differently. And I think the classes has really helped. I think understanding where kids come from and things of that nature, just our population of kids is really...
Do all your teachers participate in that?
They did. They all did.
All of them participate?
That's
How many
correct.
minority teachers do you have?
I have one.
One. Okay. So, I mean, I could see that point with there, but how do you measure to see if it's actually effective? I know a lot of this stuff is going to be really hard to see if it's effective, but if you have a teacher who's like, I feel like it's helped me, but I mean, what is that outcome that we're looking for on where should they be? I know when we did our strategic plan, they were able to our partners or the group that we had go out to the schools was able to identify those things. So what are we as a district doing, or what we already are doing, to figure out if there has been a slow change? I know change is going to take time, but if there should be something moving that I think we should at least see on this part.
So I was just going to.
But I don't want to go too much into it, but.
Yep. I was going to piggyback off your point, though, Mr. Snow, and I think just from what I've heard is that when people take the class, they see the benefit. The thing is getting people, like you said, maybe that it's voluntary, getting more people to actually take the class. But I think one of the things when you're looking at the outcome, I think it's kind of multifaceted. Because one thing is you are looking at the day-to-day interactions and relationships that teachers are having with their students. I think that is one way to measure it, because part of what they're educating around is changing the daily interaction and experience that's happening with there. And I think also on some levels, when you look at like our climate surveys and what the students are telling us about their experiences in school, hopefully you're seeing a positive reaction that happens in those areas as well. So I think it's hard to narrow it down to one specific thing, but I think there's multiple things that you're looking at that you're hoping to see an impact, and I think student achievement is one of those. Because if teachers are able to better connect with their students, you should see an increase in student achievement. So I think there's multiple things that you would hope to see impacted by the level of education that's happening through this experience.
I think maybe another thing is also the decrease in
Yep.
behaviors.
Behaviors, yeah.
Do we have data on that right now?
We do have data on the
I'm not trying to be negative.
Yeah,
but I'm just
we
saying,
do,
I mean, if you guys are answering my question, but
I guess the reason, what I need clarification on is it's not that data is there, but it's hard to specifically say that's strictly all because of this. Like, I think there's